Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your patience, us being a couple of minutes late after a closed session. I call this meeting of the Burlingame City Council on November 20th, 2023 to order. And we will start, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'd love to ask our Youth Advisory Committee to stand up and lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That takes us to the roll call. Madam City Clerk.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Present.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Here.
Councilmember Beach,
Here.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Here.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Here. That takes us to item 4, which Mr. City Attorney, we do need.
We do not have any requests for AB 2449.
Okay, I never understand this. Why is it on the agenda?
Put the address on, then we don't have to ask for permission.
I see.
The schedule.
I see. Okay. We did have a closed session, Mr. City Attorney. Were there any items to report out?
There's no reportable action tonight.
Thank you very much. That takes us to upcoming events, and there are a number of exciting events. So I'll just quickly tick over them because I know we do have a longish calendar with some important subjects to talk through. But perhaps the most exciting upcoming event is December 1st is our holiday tree lighting. It's always a lot of fun right here in front of City Hall. Starts at 5 p.m. Always has great musical groups and other fun, festive moments for everyone who comes. So please join us for the 1-hour ceremony. And then there will be train rides, and we're expecting some visitors from the North Pole. So December 1st. On December 14th, our Park and Rec is holding the Senior Jingle Jam Dance from 4:30 to 6:30, and seniors will enjoy an afternoon of dancing and dinner, which you should register at Park and Rec. And finally, our Park and Rec folks want you to know that the catalog of camps and the rest of it are going to be coming out in early December. And so please look for that and sign up for camps that starts as early as December 6th. Our library is also got a fun event on December 1st. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. It's an escape room for teens. And I suspect as soon as they get out of the house, they feel like they've escaped. So that's probably it's probably win-win right away. Anyway, sign up for that. That should be a lot of fun if you're a teen. December 7th through April 18th. So for going on 4 months, on the first and third Thursdays, there will be poetry workshops between teens and seniors led by our own poet laureate Lauren Lynn. So first and third Thursdays, 4:30 p.m. in the library, just drop in poetry workshops. And then finally, for the smaller ones among us, on November 25th, so actually coming up in just a few days, there's a contest for those in grades 2 through 6 to build the tallest cardboard building that you can build. That's in the library at 2 p.m. So those are some of the fun events coming up for the holidays. Colleagues, anything else to notify our residents about? I see none, so we'll keep going. And indeed, that takes us to a presentation that I know we always enjoy getting, which is an update from our Youth Advisory Committee.
Good evening, Council. My name is Sydney Bliss. I'm a recreation coordinator for the city here. And one of my program areas that I oversee is the Youth Advisory Committee. It's a pleasure to work with these 13 incredible teens. And they have a lot to say tonight, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. So we are the Youth Advisory Council, and we are comprised of 13 7th to 12th grade students that live or go to school in Burlingame. And our main goal is to advise and raise awareness as to the concerns and interests of teens in Burlingame.
Hi, I'm Hope Delora. I'm a freshman and this is my first year on YAC.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a junior and this is my third year on YAC.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm a senior. This is my third year on YAC.
Hi, my name is Adrian. I'm a sophomore and this is my second year on YAC.
Hi, I'm Zach. I'm a sophomore and this is my fourth year on YAC.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm a sophomore and this is my first year on YAC.
Hello, my name is Sylvia. I'm a senior and this is my fifth year on YAC.
Hi, my name is Dylan. I'm a freshman. This is my second year on YAC.
So this year, our initiative revolves around public safety and preparedness in Burlingame. A few of our future initiatives focus on topics like fire prevention, self-defense, and emergency kit preparation.
So far this year, we have assisted in the family campout, where many families gathered in Washington Park with blankets and tents and camped out, as there was also a movie projected. Here we assisted with food service and lawn games. And secondly, we also assisted in the Muddy Mile, where we cheered on and supported kids as they smiled and had fun in the mud.
Another event YAC volunteered at was the senior Halloween dance, where we helped set up decorations, mingled with the seniors, we helped pass out food, and we also danced with the seniors.
The latest event that YAC helped out with was the Fall Fest, where we helped run booths, made sure they ran smoothly, and made sure everyone had a great time as they enjoyed this Sunday.
Some of our frequently run events are Kids Night Outs. These are themed nights that have themes like Halloween and Thanksgiving. Kids participate in a variety of fun activities, and it's a great way for them to meet new friends and have a good time.
This year, a few of our members had a chance to participate in the annual YAC social event. It's an annual event and it includes an opportunity for YAC members across the Bay Area to come together and share ideas and participate in various workshops.
We have many more future events planned for the rest of the year, including helping out with the tree lighting on December 1st. And we're also super excited to be able to host in March YAC Attack, which will be another amazing opportunity to collaborate with other YACs around the Bay Area. We're also planning a cookie decorating project for the holiday season to reach out to different public safety organizations in the community and inform them about our initiative, and also holding a free self-defense workshop in January. Also, this year, we are aiming to produce either a video or a flyer every month with information related to a public safety topic, which we're calling the Community PSA Initiative. And so we have this video from October, which I'm not sure will play, but if not, it is on Facebook. Oh, there we go.
Nice.
This year, YAC made the unanimous decision to amend our bylaws to be more gender inclusive, so we will now be using they, them pronouns in our bylaws.
And finally, for why we love YAC, there are many reasons, and one of them being we love the city of Burlingame. And it's such a great opportunity to give back to a city that does so much for us. And also, it's just a great way to be with people we normally wouldn't have ever met who really care. And we've just made so many friendships and lasting impacts and relationships with people. So it's just been a great experience.
Are we You guys done? Well, thank you so much. I don't know if colleagues have any comments, but I know, I am sure we all are always impressed by how much work you put into our community. I sometimes say communities aren't made, they're not, you can't mandate them. They have to be created from, you can't mandate them from the top down. You have to build them from the bottom up. And it's work like this. You know, the most precious resource any of us have, it's a non-renewable one, and it's time. And you guys are putting time in to other people and to the community, and it really means a lot to all of us. So thank you very much for that work. And it is work, but it's also fun. That's good too. Colleagues, any other comments? Okay, Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm just blown away. I love the mid-year update because it's just a reminder of how much work you're doing along the way. And it just strikes me looking at the pictures of all the young people, even the seniors you're helping. By having youth leaders out there, it makes everything more fun. It makes it more fun for the kids in the Muddy Mile, for the folks at Harvest Festival, for the seniors at their dance. Like the resource and the opportunity really to have you folks helping staff this stuff for our community is making every event better. And it's because, not just because you're great volunteers, it's because you bring youthful energy to it too. So thank you so much for doing that. It really makes a huge difference.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you at the tree lighting. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay, that's really uplifting. The next item is public comment. This is for issues that are not on the agenda. So if you have something to say about an item that's on the agenda, then please hold it for that. But if there are any other comments of a general nature, now would be the time to make it. And I'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to make a general public comment? Yes, sir. Please join us.
My name is Norm Turello, and I'm coming tonight to speak to you about a group called MELP, which stands for Medical Equipment Loan Program. And we are an all-volunteer group, nonprofit organization that receives used or no longer needed durable medical equipment from the community. We inspect it, we repair it, we clean it, and then we make it available to others free of charge. Free is the operative word here, to anyone who needs it. We handle equipment such as wheelchairs, transport chairs, rollators, walkers, knee scooters, shower chairs and benches, crutches and canes, plus a lot of other miscellaneous equipment. We loan that equipment out to anyone in need. Loan is a bit of a misnomer because they can actually keep it as long as they need it. When they're done with it, they return it to us and the cycle repeats. Inspect, repair, clean, and reloan it. So we do this with three goals in mind: to help reduce medical inequity, to improve the quality of life for our clients, and by reusing existing equipment, we keep it out of landfills. All the equipment is free. I keep saying that because it's really important for the people that might be hearing me to understand that this stuff is available to them. We have a brochure, and I've left copies for you all. And again, nothing goes in the landfill. If we can't reloan it, we break it apart into its component pieces and recycle it. So now for this program to work, we have to receive equipment too. And with that goal in mind, we have set up a medical equipment drive occurring between 9 and 4 on December 2nd at First Presbyterian Church, 1500 Easton Drive in Burlingame. This is being put on by a local scout troop, your troop 156, who has a member that's this close to achieving Eagle rank and needs to do a community project. We've teamed up with that gentleman, and he's running the drive on the 2nd. And then after they collect the equipment and anything else they can collect in between, they'll bring it over to us on January 20th for a community drive. I'm going to come back and talk to you in December about the January 20th event. We're located at 1063 East San Carlos Avenue in San Carlos, and we're open on Saturdays to give this equipment out from 10 until 11:30. So that's the game plan. Can I answer any questions?
It's very kind of you to share the initiative with us. It sounds like a really smart idea. Thank you very much for letting us know. Are there any questions? Oh, actually, you know what? Forgive me, because it's public comment. We're not allowed to engage in a conversation because it wasn't on the agenda, but we appreciate very much being made aware of your organization and look forward. Anybody who has any additional equipment should show up Saturday, December 2nd at First Pres here in Burlingame.
Great. And I don't know if you have a senior information officer for seniors.
Let me direct you to our Park and Rec department. You look around, sir, if you turn around 180 degrees, they could come in, they could give you some.
Great. I'll leave some of these with them too. Thank you
Excellent.
very much.
Thank you so much for being here. Any other members of the audience like to make general public comment? Is there anybody on the, that there's no email comment of a general nature?
No.
Okay. Then I think that closes public comment. That takes us to the consent calendar. There are a number of items. Would anybody like to pull any item? I'd like to pull 9F and I'll be quick. But other than that, is there any member of the audience who'd like to pull anything off the consent calendar? Seeing none, is there anything in email to pull?
We got an email that's commenting on it. It also commented directly to council, but because it's an item that's on consent, I think that we should pull it just to acknowledge that there was something sent in.
Okay, which item was that?
Item.
9C.
9 what?
9C, you said?
C. So I welcome a motion for 9A, B, D, E, G, H.
Mr. Mayor, so moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Beach, seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. If we could have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes. And so those items pass 5-0. That takes us to item 9B, which is the extension of our Broadway public smoking ban to Burlingame Avenue.
So I'm just pulling this to acknowledge that there was a member of the public, Brian Davis, who emailed both council and public comments. So usually we wouldn't read it. But he's just acknowledging that his concern about the workers in areas where there would be smoking in an enclosed patio.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Since it's now on off of the consent, is there anybody in the audience who'd like to comment on this matter? We had a long conversation at the last meeting about this. Okay, I see none. Colleagues, are there any other? I beg your pardon, please. Okay. All right. We'll see you in a few minutes. So colleagues, any other comments on this ban? In which case, then I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Stevenson, seconded by Councilmember Ortiz to approve item 9C. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes, and so that passes 5-0 as well. 9F, which I asked, has to do with the wide area turf mower. We were asked by a member of the public to see whether we could manage to acquire a piece of machinery that was electric rather than fossil fuel powered. And I just wanted to say two things. Our staff made a diligent effort to see whether such a machine was possible. And I also wanted to point out, and we'll get to this in the leaf blower agenda item, that our staff has moved as far as it can into adopting electric devices and appliances for precisely the reasons that the individual called out, but that in this particular case, it just wasn't feasible for our team to find a piece of machinery that works. And I would just say that the electric revolution is coming to every single vehicle. It just isn't coming at the same speed to every single vehicle. So we really did give it a good college try. I wanted to share that. Any other comments from colleagues? All right, to open it up, anybody in the public care to comment on this? Okay, so then I will close the public comment and I will propose accepting item 9F.
I'll second.
Motion by the mayor, seconded by Councilmember Beach. Could I have a roll call vote?
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes. Thank you very much. And we do appreciate staff making an honest effort to see if we could go green on this one. And we did what we could. That takes us to 10A, our public hearing on the introduction of an ordinance amending the leaf blower regime. Who's going to take this? Our Director of Sustainability. Oh, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So tonight I'm bringing up the recommendation and direction we got from our discussion item a couple of weeks ago. Next slide, please. So the background is we talked about leaf blowers at a study session in June and at a discussion item in October. And we got direction to amend our existing ordinance to ban the use and operation of gas leaf blowers starting July 1st, 2024 to align with the state's ban of the sale of gas leaf blowers, to remove the noise requirements from our existing ordinance, and to exempt municipal operations from day of the week restrictions while using electric leaf blowers. Next slide. So this just reiterates that point about what we're doing, and what we're keeping is the day of the week restrictions. Next. And then our next steps is basically to bring this proposed ordinance to the council to have a public hearing on it, to determine that we will come back for a second reading. And then in the meantime, if it was to get adopted, staff will work on an outreach and rebate program during the next couple months to be prepared for and prior to first, to come up with both a rebate and funding for it, and also with outreach and engagement materials and an action plan to work with local landscapers. That's it. And if you have any questions, I'm here to help.
Thank you very much for turning that around so quickly. Are there questions for our staff on the proposed process and ordinance? I had one, and I'll just ask the Vice Mayor, if you have a question. I'm looking for the little yellow hand, Madam Vice Mayor, but you can also just raise your hand and I'll be able to see it, maybe a little easier even.
Thank you.
My question concerns, I read the ordinance and there's nothing in there about a penalty if you use a gas-powered leaf blower. And we did discuss that, so I just wasn't clear. Is it not in the ordinance because it doesn't have to be, or?
Well,
yeah.
well, maybe our attorney can help, but I believe that it follows our regular violation code, that for any ordinance that we have violations. I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think it doesn't state it in the ordinance, but we'll have a couple warnings before we offer a penalty. And then when we do have a penalty, we follow the violations code of how much that would be. I think the first penalty is $50, and then I can't remember if it goes up higher than that.
So yes, so I agree with Sigal. First of all, there is a penalty provision already in the ordinance. I will, for the record, I'll note that sub H should be underlined where it says property owner. Because at the council's discussion of this last time, you also directed us to specify that it wouldn't be just the gardener, themselves that are blowing the leaves, but we would be looking to the property owner that is hiring the gardening service that's actually doing that. So for the record, I wanted to highlight that. I'm sorry that that didn't make it in a red line, but that addresses the direction that we.
No, thank you very much. And by the way, somehow I did read the entire ordinance and I missed that. So it's actually in there.
Yes.
So my bad. I'm glad to see it. And I do think we need to be able to gently but firmly penalize the property owner. So I think that's the, thank you very much. Are there any other questions that before we open it up for any public comment? Yes, Mr.
Just a comment, maybe this is for when you come back before July 1st, 2024, is just what other programs, information on other programs in other communities that have worked around this question of rebates and or incentives, just so that we have some background materials that'll help us. I know there were some in the previous examples of different cities, but if there's other details you could share, that would be helpful.
Definitely.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up for the public. And so, oh, I beg your pardon, Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I might suggest that we wait just a few months before we develop that program until we find out what Peninsula Clean Energy is going to do with their surplus funds, because there may be some funds coming down that we would have discretion over how to do, and that might make a difference as to the size of the rebate, the number of rebates, and that kind of thing. And I suspect we'll have that data and information available in the first quarter. I just don't want to do something redundant.
Great, good advice.
That'd be great. Yes.
Let me open it up for public comment. Is there anyone who'd like to comment on the leaf blower, the ban on gas-powered leaf blowers? Okay, I see none. Any comment? I think this has been a pretty popular idea, so I'm not surprised that we don't have a lot of comment. Then I bring it back to my colleagues, and tonight is the night that we're introducing the ordinance. Am I right? Yeah. So would somebody like to, unless there's more comment on this, we can move to a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and make a motion to introduce the ordinance.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor, and remind me that's sufficient for purposes.
Yes.
Okay. So a motion by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Councilmember Stevenson. If we could have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownway.
Yes, so that passes 5-0, and I think that's terrific. Okay, that takes us to two important items. The first one is the potential changes to the city's flavored tobacco ban and hookah consumption, and the related question of the county tobacco retailer permit program. So who's taking this? Mr. Spansale, Mr. Gardner?
Yes. This is a team effort. And then also the police chief will be joining us. So this is a discussion. This is a very long description, but we're looking at two things in this item. The first is the potential changes to the city's flavored tobacco ban to exempt on-site hookah consumption. And then also interest in a city or county tobacco retailer permit program. The two are related, so we'll go through those. Next, please. In terms of just daylighting this, getting input from the community, letting the community know this is being discussed. The first discussion of this, it was originally brought to the Economic Development Subcommittee in May as an economic development matter, something that could assist businesses with offering the hookah services. That's also been discussed in the business improvement meetings. So both the downtown business improvement district as well as the Broadway business improvement district. Excuse me. We also administered a survey September 15th through October 1st. We got just shy of 400 responses. And one thing I like with surveys is it's also just a great way to get public awareness out, because people answer the survey, they learn, they hear about the questions, and they know what's being considered. So 400 people heard through there. We had the city council discussion on October 3rd. We've had e-news posts. We've had flyers to the businesses so that they are aware if they're not following all these other channels. And then there's also a frequently asked questions page on burlingame.org under the code enforcement section. So if people have had or continue to have questions about any of these matters, we have a bunch of the frequently asked questions there. So with all that said, let me hand it over to Assistant City Attorney Scott Spansale, who will go over the legal piece.
Great. Next slide, please. So this slide probably looks familiar. I know we've been talking a lot about this over the past few months, but I think it is important just to go over quickly a few of the state laws regarding smoking to make sure we understand if there is a consideration of a flavored tobacco exception to our flavored tobacco, or a hookah exception to our flavored tobacco ban, that we understand what can and can't be done in that scenario. So the state laws regarding smoking is mostly at the California's Clean Indoor Air Law, which was last updated back in 2016. And that essentially says that no employer can knowingly or intentionally allow smoke inside of a enclosed workspace. It prohibits smoking in offices, indoor bars, restaurants. What it doesn't do is it doesn't regulate smoking outside or in unenclosed spaces. There's also a recently passed flavored tobacco ban, SB 793, which just last December 2022, came into effect and is similar to our own City of Burlingame flavored tobacco ban that bans flavored tobacco throughout the state. But what they did there is they didn't expressly allow hookah, but they said, we're going to leave that to the local jurisdictions. If the local jurisdictions want to allow a exception to their flavored tobacco bans to allow for hookah, they can do so. So again, it doesn't expressly allow it, but allows cities to regulate it on its own. Next slide, please. The state law exceptions to the indoor smoking ban can be found in Labor Code 6404.5. We've talked about these a lot, but essentially it comes down to two main exceptions. A retail or wholesale tobacco shop, where the main purpose of that shop is to sell tobacco, or a private smoker's lounge that exists inside that retail tobacco shop, where someone can, that has to be dedicated to the use of tobacco products, but can essentially smoke inside an enclosed area of an already enclosed space. So it's almost a room within a room at a retail tobacco shop. In 2011, the California AG, Kamala Harris, she clarified that this exception does not apply if food and beverage is allowed in these locations. So anybody who's serving, who has a smoker's lounge or has a retail tobacco shop cannot serve food and drink and still qualify for that exception under the state law. Next slide, please. And then we also have SB 793. SB 793 is the larger flavored tobacco ban, but it's also allowing, as we said earlier, that exemption for flavored shisha or hookah tobacco products. But they put in some pretty strict regulations. They said, if somebody wants to sell flavored tobacco or sell flavored shisha or hookah tobacco, they must first have a valid license to sell tobacco in general. They can't just say, I'm only selling this one product. They have to have a very similar license to sell all tobacco. And they cannot permit anyone under the age of 21 years to be present or enter the premises at any time. The retailer also has to comply with any other state or local laws that are put into place. So anything that's done here today, any person who would like to sell flavored shisha or hookah tobacco would also have to comply with the laws in the city of Burlingame. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is something, as Director Gardner said earlier, is kind of related. We also want to hear the council's thoughts on the consideration of a tobacco retailer permit program. The county has recently passed a model ordinance for a tobacco retailer permit program at the county level that if the cities adopt wholesale, the county will administer the program and fund it. What they will not allow is someone to make modifications to their model ordinance, the model ordinance being essentially written word for word the way the county would like it. And in that ordinance itself, it says there could be no exceptions for flavored shisha or hookah tobacco. So if the council goes in the direction of wanting to pursue an exception to our own flavored tobacco ban for hookah, we could not participate in the county's program, so we would not avail ourselves to that funding and enforcement. However, and our police chief's going to come up in a few minutes and talk about enforcement, what the council could still do is direct staff to create a tobacco retailer permit program at the city level. We have heard feedback from the county and from some members of the public that if we were to do that, they're hoping that the council would adopt something almost exactly the same as the model ordinance, but perhaps with that exception for flavored shisha or hookah tobacco. But the city council could consider other, either a more restrictive or less restrictive permitting program too. But typically what we see here are larger fines for violators to make sure that if youth are going in and trying to buy tobacco, that there's more enforcement to ensure that's not happening. And also more distancing requirements from youth populated areas. So places like schools, daycares, colleges, anything like that where youth, libraries, community centers are also two big ones. A distance requirement that a new tobacco store that isn't already in existence here would not be able to then apply for this permit and find a location near one of those centers. And I think with that, I'll ask our police chief to come up and provide a little bit more background on what the city is currently doing towards flavored tobacco.
Things before you.
Looks like we have a question. Yes, of course you can.
So first off, when we were talking about the hookah.
Yes.
We had talked about whether it was for existing establishments or allowing them moving forward. Or was it just, we were just gonna grandfather the one that's there and not allow them moving forward?
Well, so we couldn't allow anybody currently operating to have an exception because right now there's actually not a permitted use where you can sell hookah in the city. So everyone operating right now is not actually operating under the municipal code as it stands. So it would have to be for anybody coming forward.
Thank you. Okay. Second, what constitutes enclosed when you're talking about enclosed? And I
Great
think
question.
when I visited society with the mayor, it seems like it's been pretty built out, the section that's supposed to be not enclosed.
That's a great question, and Councilmember Beach brought that up last time as well. I'm going to ask Director Gardner to come up in just 1 second to describe a little bit about the enclosure you're talking about. But in the law itself, the state law, which we now are using the definition for enclosed with, it states that enclosed space includes covered parking lots, lobbies, lounges, waiting areas, elevators, stairwells, and restrooms that are a structural part of the building and not specifically exempted like the smokers lounges.
Oh, great.
So structural part of the building is the main issue there, but Director Gardner has a little bit more knowledge I think he can pass along regarding what that looks like, because it really is a planning, community development, building question.
I won't let you off the hook.
Okay.
Now, my other question is, if the establishment is only partially used for the hookah, are we saying that the people under 21 would not be allowed in the section with the hookah or the establishment altogether?
Well, since this is a relatively new state law, I'm not sure that's been entirely fleshed out. The way that city staff is looking at this is that the area that's allowing hookah, in this case, maybe an outdoor patio, would not be allowed to have anyone 21 and over in that area, and they would have to follow all the licensing requirements.
But they would be allowed in the restaurant section.
They would be allowed in the restaurant.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Gardner.
So the planning code and building code both look at outdoor patio spaces as obviously not being fully enclosed. So the way we interpret it is there would be walls that would not go all the way up to the roof. So there'd be some sort of air gap that's of some significant amount, 2, 3, 4 feet, something like that. And then the roof also would not be structural as Mr. Spansale mentioned. So it could be, there could be a roof structure, but it's not part of the structure of the building. So in the case of the property at 1130 Broadway, there would need to be modifications to what you and the mayor saw. There is a building permit that has been issued for those modifications to allow that to be a properly outdoor or to be considered an outdoor patio space. It can be covered, it doesn't have to be. So it's mainly can't have walls all the way up to the roof. So either the walls come down, the roof comes off, or some combination of that. You can have a roof on top and then have kind of fences. There is a restaurant next door. I believe it's a Chinese restaurant that has a similar setup, but it's compliant with what we would consider an outdoor patio. So it has fences that go to about 5 or 6 feet. And then there's a kind of metal pole roof structure above, and then there's plenty of kind of airspace between, and that we would consider an outdoor patio.
Just a quick question, and that's establishment allows smoking in that back patio?
They could.
Okay.
I don't know whether that establishment does or not, but per what we discussed 2 weeks ago, yeah, they, if they did want to allow smoking in their back patio, that would qualify as an outdoor space and then smoking would be allowed.
Thank you.
So good evening, Mayor and council members. At the last city council meeting where we discussed this topic, the question was asked about Burlingame Police Department's enforcement in regards to tobacco and flavored tobacco. And although we do conduct multiple enforcement operations, I didn't have specifics at that time, but I do tonight. So just to summarize, in response to the California Senate Bill 793, which is the state ban on flavored tobacco that took effect in December of last year, we did the following. So in January of 2023, our enforcement unit conducted outreach and education specific to Senate Bill 793. The tobacco retailers in Burlingame were contacted and provided information and education related to the new laws banning flavored tobacco in the state. Then in May of 2023, our enforcement unit circled back and actually conducted compliance checks at those tobacco retailers in Burlingame. At least one of those checks was an undercover operation based on a specific complaint, but no violations were found at any of the retail establishments. Then in October of 2023, our enforcement unit actually conducted undercover operations at tobacco retailers in Burlingame. Undercover officers were able to purchase flavored tobacco from two different retailers. Both retailers were issued citations and 306 items of flavored tobacco were seized. All other retailers visited during that operation were in compliance. In addition to the operations at retail locations, we also do specific tobacco patrol operations at our schools and our parks. In February 2023, our enforcement unit conducted tobacco enforcement patrols at all school properties throughout Burlingame. During that detail, juveniles were located using tobacco products. Parents were notified, but no citations were issued. In May of 2023, our enforcement unit conducted specific tobacco enforcement patrols at all city parks and schools. During that detail, juveniles were again located using tobacco products. Parents were notified and at least one citation was issued during that detail. And then again in October, our enforcement unit conducted tobacco enforcement patrols at all city parks and schools, but during that detail, no violations were found. So to summarize, so far in 2023, we've done 6 total operations, 3 focused on retail establishments and 3 focused on schools and parks. And many of these operations were helped in part by a state grant that was actually brought to the police department's attention by Vice Mayor Colson. So we thank her for that. And I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Thank you for that report, Chief. I'll wait for the presentations to be done and we'll see if there are questions for anybody.
That is the presentation, so we are here for questions.
Okay. So colleagues, let's start with any questions that we might have for staff, and then we'll entertain public comment. Any questions with respect to the presentation? I have only one question, which I should have asked before, and that is, it doesn't have to do with flavored tobacco, but that is, what are our current rules on cannabis consumption?
Currently, other than the tobacco delivery program, which the council considered about 2 years ago, our
cannabis delivery.
Yes, sorry. Our regulations generally just parallel state law regarding cannabis. So
you cannot smoke cannabis in a public, a bar could not have a cannabis patio. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thanks. We sometimes adopt things without thinking about all of the different consequences, but in this case, it's separate legislation, separate regime.
And staff can certainly come back with any information should we find that there. It's a great question. As you know, sometimes staff gets very in the weeds on certain details and get spun up there. So that's something I can certainly do a lot more research on and come back.
Okay. And then my other question has to do with quota systems, and should the council decide to allow a hookah lounge in its current form, what are the provisions for, as we did with cannabis distribution, where we initially said we would only allow 4 licenses? What are the rules of the road for that?
So that's certainly something we could do, and I think it's something that could be considered in the context of the tobacco retailer permit program. We could create a separate area for hookah, should the council believe that's the way to go. And you could limit it. We would not want to limit it at one, because we do already have one establishment who's here today to advocate for that. So we'd want to make sure that we're not just taking action for one business, but if there is a number 3, 4, something like that, that the council felt was a fair cap, that's certainly something that we could implement into that program.
Thank you. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, then I'm going to open it up for public comment.
One more question, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Madam.
no worries. I just wanted to follow on to your question, which was a good one, and ask, if we were to allow permits, if we were to permit, could we permit by, could we geofence type of permit? So in other words, could we say like one on the bayfront, one on the, one here, one there, something like that?
We could certainly do it with any objective standard. So we could do that based off of districts. We could do that based off of zoning. We could do that based off of distance from one another. But that's certainly something that could be reasonably imposed.
Thank you. Anything else, Madam Vice Mayor? No. Okay. Then in that case, I'm gonna open it up for public comment. Could I just have a quick show of hands as to who would like to comment on this item? Okay. I'm going to allow 2 minutes, with the exception of the business owner, who I think it's fair to give 3 minutes to, because it's your business that's in question. But otherwise, I'm going to keep it to 2, just because we have another long item after this. As people know, I don't tend to gavel down if you're slightly over, but I would ask you to respect the clock that's right there. And that's mostly so that we can go forward with a conversation. So with that in mind, I'd welcome people to the stand, to the podium.
I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Burlingame City Council for all the work you do to keep Burlingame a great place to live. My name is Tiffany Toda, and I'm a longtime resident and marriage and family therapist here in San Mateo County. It is not lost upon me the importance of the smoking ban ordinance and the spirit in which it was written. In fact, I'm doing a workshop for our local high school next week on the impact of drugs, alcohol, and vaping. However, in this case, of the Restaurant Society and the Burlingame Tobacconist, I question the reasoning for not granting the exemption, which I understand has the majority of voters in favor of. I trust the council can look at each situation and address accordingly to what is necessary for the thriving of Burlingame businesses. If Burlingame residents were not in favor of this exemption, I've been a resident long enough to know they would have voted to the contrary of it, and we voted to affirm it. These two businesses have long established traditions in Burlingame. Prior to Society, there was Beirut, which has been a staple in Burlingame nightlife. Society has taken this concept and created an even more elevated, sophisticated dining experience that includes the hookah. As someone who has frequented the restaurant many times and not smoked hookah, you hardly notice it or its odor. The reason I and many other people frequent it is because you only see adults. We love the kids, but having an adult space is so important for us. And Society provides that. The hookah just adds a different element, and it's a unique experience, which makes everyone that's there, you're making an adult choice to be there. It's not hurting anyone nor influencing our youth in any way. My hope is you will vote for the exemption, as I would hate to see these wonderful businesses close for any reason outside of just flexibility in this ordinance. So please honor the residents' wishes and assess this, and please approve.
Thank you very much. Please step up.
Dear council member, we already talked before about the main points, so I will make it short, brief for you. As we mentioned before, hookah is a little bit like the cultural gathering stuff, and It's like the different than the smoking, like cigarettes or the vaping, and it's not easy to conceal with your pocket, and you can do the separate preparation. So because of that, we agree the last times on the meeting that we mentioned, we support the easy access, this kind of stuff for the youth, but hookah is the some adult choice stuff, and that will be like for the adults right to enjoy it, or they will choose it, like they're drinking alcohol or like the smoking in their patio, like the smoking. So on this case, society is bringing like the opportunity to control with the city regulations, and we want to make it like a state laws fitting this together, and we will keep the like a city will be authorizations, like city will be the authority on that part. So we want to make it like a of course, like the keeping our kids and youths on the like our community. We like Burlingame community. We like our city. We want to make it good for them. We don't want to be like we are making the ID checks. We don't want them to access the easy for the under 21. As you mentioned, maybe the restaurant area, yes, they can come enjoy with the family, but they cannot come to smoking patio area. This is what I want to explain that, and I hope you will consider this part. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being here.
Good evening. I would love to give you a couple information. First one was the police chief. When he was mentioning for the citations, we never served it, we never received any citation, which is you didn't say anything. And second thing was the construction. Yes, when you guys were there, we were enclosed, but we had a tent over top of it. But right now, we fix it up with the city. We go down to the 7 feet and we have a 4 feet open space, all three areas. And then the top of the roof is only covered with the tents. I would love to tell you, thank you so much for your time. You guys make an amazing tent. And we would love to follow the state regulation and support it up to society. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Who else would like to comment?
Good evening. My name is Blythe Young. I'm the Community Advocacy Director for the American Heart Association. I had the opportunity to meet with a few of you and want to thank you for your time. The way that I see it, you have two options tonight. You can do what many cities have done, and you can keep your comprehensive flavored tobacco restriction without exemption. Businesses in other cities still have hookah lounges. They are still very prevalent, and they have switched products. There's a product called Steam Stones that is non-tobacco and still flavored, can still be used with a traditional hookah pipe. And so if we're talking about preserving cultural tradition with being in compliance with California Clean Indoor Air Act and your local law and staying in business, there is a win-win-win option that also wouldn't tie up your valuable police department time in enforcement. You can hand that off to the county and free up your PD. We couldn't get hookah at the state level. We had to take an incremental policy. I'm still working city by city, county by county on flavored tobacco policies, asking folks to close the loophole, given that there are viable alternative products that have shown success. Your other option is to limit the existing businesses with a hookah exemption and not allow the retail sale of flavored shisha to go. So it would be on-site use only for those that exist now, no more businesses, augmenting this, and to adopt a strong TRL that mirrors the county with your exemption being the only change that you make that has 2 proactive compliance checks per year. I also have a member of the county here from tobacco program staff that has additional information on retail inspections and checks that she can provide if you invite her up. Her name is Mayra Diaz Ramirez. And then I also have a member of the Youth Commission here to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Who else would like to comment?
Good evening. My name is Alondra Ordonez, and I'm a student at Notre Dame Belmont. I'm here tonight asking for your support of a strong tobacco retail license for our city. I believe that Burlingame should move forward with a comprehensive licensing policy that includes annual compliance checks and does not allow for any exemptions, including hookah lounges. This is the best way to ensure retailers are not selling tobacco products to kids and youth. The county recently adopted a comprehensive tobacco retail, licensure ordinance, and I hope Burlingame partners with the county to implement an equally strong program. Today, too many kids like me are using tobacco products, including e-cigarettes and others, and this can lead to a lifelong nicotine addiction. In fact, most adults who use tobacco products have started by the age of 18. This is why we need to do everything possible to reduce youth tobacco use, to avoid having a strong local license with adequate checks and enforcement is critical. Without regular compliance checks, retailers will continue to profit from youth nicotine addiction without facing consequences for violating the law. This issue is important to me because from knowing acquaintances who have started using tobacco products, I know that once youth start using tobacco products, it becomes a cycle and possibly a lifelong addiction. This is the opportunity to make a significant difference in the health and well-being of youth. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Yes.
Who else would like to speak? I saw a lot more hands.
Good evening, Council.
So Megan, I'd like to make sure that, thank you.
I might not need it 3 minutes out of
Okay.
back. Just wanna tell you guys, also last time I was bringing some petitioner form and there are some.
Can you hear? Okay.
There are
Can you hold the microphone?
Yeah, definitely. So there are so many people were not able to make it out tonight. And then, so basically, we are just like talking on the same frame. And I have some supporters here. And when the people stand up, basically they're gonna talk about the same thing. I just wanna ask for a second to raise up their hands. And then you guys raise up the hand. So basically, these people are here to support, and then we just want to ask for the exemption. And second of all, as my business partner mentioned that we pull all the permits. We did all the adjustment for the enclosing area. You guys are more than able to check. And we also had the inspection by the police department. Undercover 2 officers were in the location. While we are showing our good faith during this councilor meetings that we were not serving at all, and also officers came out of sudden and they see in their eyes we were not doing it, and overall I just want to wrap it up that way. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I actually have a question.
Sure.
Toronto banned smoking tobacco through a water pipe back in 2016, Toronto, Canada.
Okay.
And I was curious what had happened to the hookah society there. And there are 20 hookah lounges there that use steam stones. And at least if you read their websites and you read the reviews, people are having a great time, people are socializing, people get a lot of smoke, they're just not getting a lot of nicotine. And I wonder what you would think about using steam stones in society.
I personally never use it. And then there are some authorities are saying there's a chemical in there. So instead of a tobacco material. So I'm not a scientist, I cannot compare exactly. But the flavored tobacco with the state of California license that we are able to serve as an exhibition only hookah, that says on the law. And then if I say that, I will be definitely agree whatever you were mentioning, I will be wrong because I never tried it. So, and I cannot create the concept based on what happened in the Toronto, Canada. So.
Right.
Yeah, but
I was just sort of curious.
It will be hard to explain that to the people. So maybe people were over there, they were know what was happening. But in here, if I said, okay, it's like steam stone instead of tobacco, it might take some time. And I won't be as a like advertiser of the Steamstone. I just want to do the like regular business, you know. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so
very
much. Thank you.
All right, excuse me, sir. Any other questions for the owner of society, just while we have him at the podium? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Sure.
Please join us if you have comments.
Hello, Council. My name is Ahmed Kadura. I own and operate 21st Century Home Health Services, which is based here in Burlingame. We have over 350 people that work with us full time. And I've been a resident of the area for a long time. The past two owners that I've previously owned the residents have had a very similar structure and setup. But they did something a little different, which I think just needs to be recognized, which as new owners coming in, whenever you open up a business, there's a significant risk that you take in terms of, creating an environment, not just financial risk, but also adding much additional more labor. The place was always a little bit more understaffed. Getting food, trying to get an order was difficult. If you go there, the experience of society is amazing in terms of they provide a lot more opportunities and jobs to the people in the area than previous business owners have. They put a lot more financial investment into it. So it's a place that you can feel proud of. I myself have had numerous events there to host my teams. And I think Burlingame really needs a place like that. It needs a place that you can be proud of to go into and take a look around and see a nice investment, especially in an area where it's really expensive to do so. And speaking from a business owner's perspective, that's the big risk that there is. So when an owner comes in and they believe they have this exemption allowed to them, and then now they're being asked to basically walk away from it. And to your point, there's always going to be a way to try to pivot as a business, but there's also going to be the consequences that will happen of like what's happening right now in San Francisco, where there's numerous places to do it, but it's not regulated, right? And the places are not very nice. So that's where consumers will end up wanting to go to, is places that aren't going to be under health code and aren't regulated, which I think if you walk in there, you could take a look, you could see how clean it is in the area. So that's one thing that I would just want to bring to your attention, is just as a business owner, is to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. We had a chance to speak last time I was here. I touched on a couple topics. One that I think is important is that Broadway and Burlingame together have become a destination point, not just for the members in the community like myself who've lived here for a long time, for people that are outsiders, people that are coming into SFO, people that are visiting from a few towns over. The key word is destination. And I think society has emphasized that on Broadway. It's definitely brought the street up to par. It's kind of got to catch up to Burlingame Avenue in a way. And as somebody who has visited Beirut, which was the previous restaurant, and seen how it evolved along with the entire Broadway street, I think the key word is also adult manner. Like somebody mentioned in the previous speech, it's not type of place it's bringing in kids. I mean, they're enforcing all the rules, they're compliant, they're following all the coding with all the construction. I think as long as you keep on tab what's going on with them over the next year, there should be a nice resolution we can come to, because it's only providing positive to the neighborhood. And we want to see them thrive as the Burlingame community. We want to support them. And if this exemption doesn't go through, they're going to suffer from this. You mentioned something earlier when they were talking about the YAC meeting, the time. You valued the idea of time. Imagine how much time that they had put in to build this beautiful place. And it would be a shame to just see it all crumble down. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for sharing your views. Who else? Ms. Corey.
Members, I'm speaking to you with passion and love to my city, Burlingame. I live and work in Burlingame. I personally have been multiple times to society. It's a pleasure to go there and take friends there and have a nice evening after a hard, long working week. I don't want to go to the city. And I feel it's the same way about people living in other cities that want to come here after they find out about society. It's something to be proud of. They spent over, from what I understand, over $1.5 million on remodeling this business, and they're still trying to invest more and more to accommodate all the regulations and rules that would make it safe and with the right regulation to the city. I feel we need adults with money to shop and not children on Broadway. We don't have enough traffic on Broadway. And I feel hookah can be a destination for customers that don't live in Burlingame as well. And the amount of business that it can bring to Broadway is huge from my vision. Since we need to increase foot traffic on Broadway, and since the state doesn't regulate outside hookah, and it leaves it up to the city council of the city, I'm asking you please to look into this and see whatever you can do to make this stay, because without hookah, 95% of the business is gone. When I go there, I don't have to smoke hookah all the time. The food is amazing. The ambiance is amazing. The music, it's the most sophisticated and elegant place I found on the peninsula in the Bay Area. And even when I go to LA, there isn't anything to match this specific things that they've done to it. They spent a lot of heartfelt effort into it. And after my investigation in Redwood City to find out what did they do, they took it as a single exception to grandfather an existing business that had hookah before with no restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Corey. Anybody else like to comment?
Hi, my name is Trisha Barr, and I'm a co-chair of the San Mateo County Tobacco Education Coalition, and I have a letter to read from Ana Polita, of the CEO of the Peninsula Healthcare District, and from the Tobacco Education Coalition. Seeking to curb the usage of flavored tobacco, particularly in children, Burlingame unanimously passed a ban on flavored tobacco in 2019. This legislature was an important step in ensuring that dangerous tobacco products did not fall into the hands of Burlingame children and teenagers. Now, with the county's most recent tobacco retailer laws, the county pledged to support cities within the county that match its ordinance, including maintaining full restrictions on the sale of flavored tobacco. If the city of Burlingame were to allow an exemption, the support would not be provided. Jurisdictions throughout the Bay Area have implemented similar restrictions on all flavored tobacco without jeopardizing prosperity of local companies. Many lounges have replaced flavored tobacco with other products and emphasized the social aspects of the act. I'm gonna jump down. We talked the last time about hookah and how harmful it is, and that it's not less harmful than cigarettes. I'm going to jump down to, if the city of Burlingame weakens its law and allows an exemption to its existing flavored tobacco ban, it sends a message that hookah is dissimilar to other forms of smoking, when in reality, it poses the same risks. Council members, unlike at the state level, you alone are the decision makers on this issue in Burlingame. It sends a message. We urge you to adopt the county's tobacco retailer permit ordinance, which provides the permit process as well as meaningful compliance and enforcement measures. Young people face enough challenges. We want to make sure that we set them up for success, not signal that hookah is any less addictive or harmful than other forms of tobacco, or provide a social environment that encourages it. They deserve better. I ask for your leadership and offer our partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barr. Please.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I am here to voice my full support of society. For me personally, my family and I spend a lot of time in downtown Burlingame Avenue, but not so much Broadway. That is until society came along. It's a very welcome and refreshing addition to the neighborhood. People, friends of ours, come from all up and down the peninsula just to visit society. It is a wonderful place to gather. Excellent food, excellent service, very welcoming. And for me personally, it's very important that young people like my son have a safe place to gather, to have a drink, to eat good food, and if they choose to, smoke hookah, which not everybody likes to do, but it is an adult over 21 establishment. And I'm not understanding the connection that has been made here between children and teenagers and exposure. One has nothing to do with the other in my view. They are accommodating, they're following the laws, they're doing what they have to do with the ordinance. They're being very forthcoming. They've invested a lot of time and money and effort, in my eyes, to enrich Burlingame and to enrich Broadway. So I feel that you should really consider letting this establishment happen. And it's not just, it's a cultural experience, it's tradition. You mentioned earlier how you feel about community, and I think this society emphasizes that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming. Would anyone else like to comment? Yes, well, sir, you've already commented once, so it's one and done on. I'll bring you up in a second.
Hi, my name is Lauren Ustel, and I've lived in Burlingame for 10 years, and I've been a business owner for 8. And I think that it's really great, the community that Burlingame has, and that these establishments, that, you know, it's not the only society. They have other restaurants in the community, and they've really focused on being a part of that community and following along with everything that you guys have asked them. And I would like to second what she just said about it not being related to the youth, because they are definitely not advertising to the youth. It has been very much so advertised as a place for adults to have somewhere clean and beautiful and enjoyable to go, which Burlingame doesn't really offer a lot of that. And I think it comes down to just following the laws that are already in place, and hookah, based on the laws that the lawyer was saying, seems like there's definitely a space in those laws to allow for it, as long as the business establishments are following those rules that you guys have put in place. So I think all of the comments about how everybody loves this business and all of that kind of stuff is great. And then there's also the facts and the laws. And I do see a place there where you can follow the laws and allow this community to grow and support a cultural environment where Burlingame has an opportunity to really branch out in that area, I think. So thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. I'll entertain one. You want to comment on Steam Stones? Please.
Mayor, you were asking about the steam stone. I check it up. There's a chemical inside. So I am not 100% sure if California is allowed it or not, but I know that there's a chemicals inside. Hookah is harmless too with the nicotine, but the steam stone looks like it's more. And second thing, if we do the steam stone in society, would it be survive? I don't think so, because there's a numerous hookah lounges serving the nicotine, tobacco flavored. So I don't think it's going to be good option for the people to come for the new experimental. So we see that since October 2nd, we closed it to hookah. We lost 95% of the business. And then the employees, unfortunately, with this steam stone, I don't think we're going to be able to survive it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, if you've allowed one person to have a second bite at the apple, you're going to have to allow everybody else to have a second bite at the apple.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I was interested because it has to do with a specific style of hookah, but please join us for 10 or 15 seconds, which is, I think, about how long it took.
Response to the same product. So at the American Heart Association, we do a lot of scientific review, and that's why today I cannot make a statement that one is safer than the other. What I can say is that tobacco is full of carcinogens, chemicals. Formaldehyde is often an ingredient used, and we could debate all day which one is better. I know that one is compliant with California Clean Indoor Air Act as of today, and one is not. So it sounds like it would save them a permitting process and some remodeling, and it is a viable option. It's what's used all over San Francisco. It's used in numerous other cities throughout the Bay Area that have policies like yours that's currently in place. So they haven't closed their doors in the 4 years that they've had their policies. I think that says something, and I just wanted to add that we don't know scientifically today one way or the other. And so I'd like to just make sure that we're not jumping to conclusions about health outcomes with different products.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that since I was up here last, Senator Jerry Hill also signed on to the letter urging you to adopt the county's ordinance and not weakening the ordinance that you already have in place. And also the emphasis that you alone are the sole decision makers on this. He was not the sole decision maker at the state and reluctantly had to move forward with the carve out.
Thank you. Any other commentary, preferably of an original nature?
We do have several emails.
Emails. Okay, let's go to emails.
Bob Trahan emailed in. He says, "My name is Bob and I am the owner of 12 Month, a restaurant here in Burlingame. I'm writing to
Madam City Clerk, could you get closer to the microphone?
I'm writing to strongly support various businesses that are adult only to be allowed to have smoking experiences. I believe that most joy in life is derived from having real world experiences, and further that consenting adults should be able to use substances like tobacco or alcohol so long as only other consenting adults are impacted by these decisions. As such, a business like Society or the Burlingame Tobacconist should be allowed to operate as they serve to enrich our community as members choose to enjoy these experiences. Thank you for your consideration." We also received several emails that went to both, so I'll just acknowledge them and then keep it moving. But this one is from Trish Novak. She says, "My name is Trish and I've been a salon owner and an independent contractor for over 25 years in Burlingame. I'm writing to you today for your consideration to allow the new Restaurant Society to continue to operate their business with the Hookah Lounge. It is important to understand that this is allowing a much needed area to have an exciting and fun restaurant to be on Broadway in Burlingame. The amount of business it will bring to the street is a huge consideration. Hookah is odorless. It's an experience just as going to a bar and meeting friends for a drink. It's an adult experience that will bring much needed business to the area and will create more traffic for the other businesses. Please strongly consider allowing this restaurant to have a chance to show you what a wonderful addition it will be to Broadway in Burlingame." Our next email is says, "I want to express my deep appreciation for the opportunity to address this important issue today. I stand before you not only as a concerned member of our community, but also as a representative of a cultural heritage that is deeply rooted in the tradition of hookah. Hookah holds a special place in our culture, serving as a bridge to our ancestral traditions and a symbol of communal bonding. It has been an integral part of our gatherings, ceremonies, and celebrations for generations. It's a tradition that has been passed down through the ages, carrying with it the values and stories of our people. While I acknowledge the health concerns associated with hookah use, I want to emphasize that our community is committed to responsible and safe practices. Banning hookah outright would not only infringe upon our cultural rights, but also disrupt the delicate balance we have maintained between preserving our heritage and addressing public health concerns." The next email is from Radu. He also emailed council, so I'll skip over this one, but he is in support of the Hookah Lounge. And we got one from Anna that was also sent to the council, which is in support. Claudia writes in, I'm writing to express my support for the Society Restaurant in Burlingame maintaining their hookah license. We lived in San Francisco for many years and enjoyed the diverse experiences that were afforded to patrons up in the city, beyond just a dining experience, from hookah to live music. One thing we have missed since moving down to the peninsula is these types of experiences. We strongly encourage the city to offer its residents the opportunity to enjoy these types of diverse experiences without having to go up to the city. We also got an email from Jay. He wrote to the council and he is writing to discuss the recent developments in state regulations concerning the use of hookah, particularly in light of our ordinance that we previously passed. We got an email from Lucy. She says, "It is I, your friendly neighbor from the city of San Mateo, Lucy, and I'm earnestly asking and strongly encouraging the city council to not approve an exemption to the flavored tobacco ban to allow on-premise consumption of hookah. The ban is already in place and has been since the beginning of the year, yet the establishment that you are considering the exemption for has blatantly ignored the ban and from my perspective, has decided that they know better and the rules do not apply to them. They have been in violation of the flavored tobacco ban. That is blatant disrespect and should not be tolerated. What kind of message does that send to the residents of this great city? What kind of message does that send to the rest of the county and state when it comes to the city of Burlingame and their stance on tobacco? I also strongly encourage the council to adopt the county's tobacco retail permit program in its entirety, since the county is willing to take on the enforcement and maintenance of the program. The cities of San Mateo and San Carlos have adopted this program, which is smart since the county is already putting together processes and staff to enforce the flavored tobacco ban, and they have the capacity to apply any fines and other measures to ensure retailers are in compliance. This will allow cities to focus on more city-specific issues. Working smarter rather than harder is always a great thing. We also got an email from Cecilia, who also emailed council. She is in support of the keeping flavored tobacco out of the hands of minors. And she asked that you don't opt into the county permitting program. We received an email from Ray, who also emailed the council. And he wants the city ordinance related to hookah usage to be brought in line with the state regulations. We got an email from, if I mispronounced your name, I'm sorry, Dogan, who also emailed the council, who similarly asked that it be brought in line with the state regulations. And we got an email from Molly, who states, "Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Molly St. Clair. As a resident of Burlingame, I'm writing in support of a strong tobacco retail license for our city. I believe that Burlingame should move forward with a comprehensive licensing policy that includes annual compliance checks and does not allow for any exclusions, including hookah lounges. This is the best way to ensure retailers are not selling tobacco products to kids. The county recently adopted a comprehensive tobacco retail licensure ordinance, and I hope Burlingame partners with the county to implement an equally strong program. This issue is important to me because I have 3 sons, one a high school freshman, one a 7th grader, and one an I fear for their environment as they enter into their later years of high school, and I fear for all the kids here who don't necessarily have parents that understand what the tobacco policy is and how easy it is right now to obtain it. I moved here for the same reason many families do, to raise my kids in a safe environment and one that is progressive in their laws. Up until recently, I believed we lived in that environment. I beg you to not go backwards with our health initiatives. That is not the Burlingame I know and the city I feel proud to live in. Today, too many children are using tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, and this can lead to a lifelong nicotine addiction. In fact, most adults who use tobacco products started by age 18. This is why we need to do everything possible to reduce youth tobacco use. Having a strong local license with adequate checks and enforcement is critical. Without regular compliance checks, retailers will continue to profit from youth nicotine addiction without facing consequences for violating the law. Thank you. And I believe that is it.
Well read.
Thank
Thank you. So just before we go to council conversation, this is not an action item, but we are trying to drive towards a decision because uncertainty for business is the worst situation to be in. Are there any other comments from members of the public? Yes, please come join us.
Hi, my name is Dina McTesey. I have been a resident of Burlingame for the majority of my life. And society is by far my favorite place that has come along. I have been able to bring so many people to society that have loved it, and they have been coming ever since. It has brought so many people to Broadway Burlingame, more than I've seen any other business bring there. I think it is completely harmless to allow the hookah to be available there, as it is a choice for whoever wants to come or not. I hope you consider allowing the hookah, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, I see no other hands or people coming. I'm going to close public comment. Council, this now is before us. It is, I think, a very difficult set of questions. Would welcome anybody to go first, and I would welcome this to be a conversation. It doesn't have to be just this is my point of view and I'm done, but at the same time we do need to move forward. Would
let me tell you my point of view.
Please, Mr. Ortiz.
Okay, so and I'm struggling with it because I really would like to be part of the county's initiative, and but I've been inclined to approve the hookah exemption because when we passed the flavored tobacco product, that's not what I was envisioning, that we were protecting adults from themselves. We were protecting kids from being able to access flavored tobacco, which is going to be something that gets them young and gets them hooked early on. So this is not, it doesn't fit the spirit of that law for what I feel I voted for. So my only struggle is I would like to participate with the county, and I'm just disappointed that exclusion would. So our choice is we make the exclusion and not participate with the county, or vice versa. So I'm struggling, but I'm kind of leaning to saying yes. So I'm curious to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to follow on to Councilman Ortiz's comments. I think the only place we probably differed is that I am extremely comfortable that our police force can enforce tobacco, and that they have done a good job. I think the chief's report was very comprehensive, and I'm a little worried about abdicating this up to a big bureaucracy at the county level. And I spoke to someone at one of the other cities who told me that it has not run as smoothly as they had hoped. So I have a lot of confidence in our police team and our ability to do this work. They have applied every year for this grant, I believe. It's pretty significant. I want to thank, I believe it was either Heather or one of our other police officers who worked really closely with staff to get this going. And I feel very comfortable that our chief and our officers are really doing the best work. And we're not just going to get twice a year, someone coming in and checking. We're going to get 6 times or more with our police department. So I think we're going to get better enforcement out of our local officers. I also prefer to allow consenting adults over the age of 21 to partake in, legal experiences, whether that's alcohol or cannabis or, in this case, hookah. I think that that is a
framework from within which I have operated, especially given that we are growing our community. We are building more apartments. We have always wanted to be a welcoming community. We have always welcomed diversity. We've always tried to be inclusive. We have always wanted, and I think we've noticed, more people of different cultures moving and coming and enjoying our community. We see it in our schools, and we see it in our churches and our temples and our mosques. And I think having that rich cultural fabric in Burlingame is what makes us so special. And when we do that, we're going to have to realize that there are other cultures, experiences, and traditions that are going to come with that diversity. And so long as the people are engaging in those experiences in a way that is legal and complying with our laws and the state laws, I find it very hard, particularly as sort of a white woman, to tell other cultures what they can and cannot do, so long as it is legal and we do enforce. So that is, where I'm kind of coming down. I think about Native Americans. I think about lots of cultures that have taken in tobacco. And funny enough, the stones, I actually looked them up as well, and they are coated with glycerin, and that's what you smoke glycerin. So I'm not 100% sure, and there doesn't seem to be enough data to suggest whether it's good or not. It seems to me a little bit like the turf conversation. You move from one thing to another thinking it's good, then you find out later maybe it's not. So I'm disinclined to force people into the steam stone until we have more research on that and we understand a little better. So with that, my inclination would be to amend our ordinance to allow for the hookah, and I would suggest we consider allowing the possibility of 2 locations, one on the east side and one on the west side of Highway 101. We may not get a second application. I don't think our cannabis permits have even been all taken up, but I think it's only fair not to make it just a consideration for one, and that I personally want to make this an inclusive and welcoming community for all cultures.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I appreciate the Vice Mayor's comments, Councilmember Ortiz as well. Some things I agree with you on, Madam Vice Mayor, and some I differ. And I appreciate the passion that's in the room tonight about this issue on both sides. We can't legislate based on one particular individual or one restaurant. We're all trying to grapple with sort of the policy issues here. But I do appreciate that people have a lot of respect and passion behind society. In terms of where I agree with you, Madam Vice Mayor, I trust the police department too. I think they did a really good job enforcing this past year with the new legislation. But I think the question I have in my mind is, what else could they be doing with their time if somebody else could help them? They still wanted to go for grants. I guess we could still continue to enforce, but it would be, I think, very valuable to have the option of the county doing that enforcement. And it's more than just the inspections. It's writing the ordinance, and then it's fining when necessary, and then following up and going back again. So the way I look at this is we currently have on the books, and let's remember here, the law in Burlingame is that there's no flavored tobacco. So right now we're in violation of the law. Let's make that clear. It is not, we do not allow flavored tobacco sale or use sale in Burlingame. And so we have a situation where we're not following the laws. So we would be making an amendment to our law to allow this exception. And if we do that, that's going to actually cost the taxpayers of Burlingame additional funding, because we are bypassing the county of saying, we will do it for you. We will, the enforcement will be paid for by the county and handled by the county. And if we abdicate that right, we have to figure out a way to fund it, either through grant funding or our own general fund. So this exception is going to be costing potentially the taxpayers money to enforce. I do appreciate you brought up, Madam Vice Mayor, the cultural fabric. I have lived around the world in different cultures. I mentioned that in the last meeting. 30 years ago, I was thinking of this year. I lived 1 year in a culture where I would get on a bus and I couldn't see 3 seats in front of me because there was smoke everywhere when you would travel on a bus. That was the culture in this country I lived in for a year. I went back 25 years later to visit with my family, and that culture changed. Smoking wasn't allowed on buses anymore, wasn't allowed in restaurants. The smoking culture changed through probably education, through advocacy, but also through public policy that didn't allow smoking on buses. So I think there's cultures can change and evolve when it comes to hookah. When I think of flavored tobacco, the big picture is flavored tobacco makes it tastier, more enticing, and more fun to smoke. That's why it was invented. It makes it better. So whether it's adults or kids, is that a good idea? I think our police power is trying to promote public safety, public health. In my opinion, and it's just my opinion, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to go backwards on this when we were so proud in 2019 that we were making a real stand on let's not have flavored tobacco sale in this. And we all high-fived and we felt really proud and we celebrated that a lot, very publicly. And so this is going backwards. And as much as I think this restaurant is a terrific place, I think we're better served moving forward and falling in line with the county's enforcement mechanism, so it doesn't cost the taxpayer dollars or our police or our code enforcement officers who are busy doing a lot of other things the time. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach. If you want to go next.
I'll be happy to go next. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm very conflicted on this topic. I wasn't around in 2019 when this was passed as a ordinance. But I believe in my heart that the real reason for passing this flavored tobacco ban was actually to prevent access to youth underage through retail shops, which were not the tobacconists, not the hookah lounges, was not these other places. So I personally don't smoke. I don't like smoke. I avoid it. I understand why the state put in provisions to stop smoking in bars and restaurants because of the health and safety of the employee and to make it more enjoyable potentially for patrons without incurring a health risk. But in certain circumstances, I don't know if it's fair to legislate from the dais provisions that are allowed at a state level when you can actually control the access to that flavored tobacco product. So I'm inclined to adjust and allow the exemption, but I do have a stipulation in my mind, which is just like in alcohol sales, every institution that either serves it or that it must post placards, must post education. And we could even consider in the licensing or the use permit for this, a fee that would go to education for youth, whether it's the American Cancer Society, whether it's the Heart Association, whether it's something at a county level. And I'm disappointed that the county isn't more flexible on the program. And so, the fact of the matter is the state allows for hookah consumption for consenting adults. And as long as an institution can protect employees and not arbitrarily affect their health, then I would rather let education and common sense prevail. So that's where I come out.
Thank you for that. So I'm gonna, obviously people can count, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna share where I wind up coming out on this. I've thought about this for a long time. I think this is a really hard issue, and I don't know if I'll change anybody's mind or not. But so one, I put the importance, as the vice mayor underscored, of being a welcoming community very high up. I do think that's important. I think you can tell when communities welcome newcomers by, allowing everybody to have their their Oktoberfest or their, their different celebrations from their home countries. And I think that's one of the reasons that makes our country so successful in terms of welcoming immigrants from around the world, is that we are welcoming. So that's an important factor for me. I also happen to agree with Councilman Ortiz that when we adopted this legislation, it was really aimed at retail and it was aimed at kids buying flavored chewing tobacco and other stuff. Hookah just didn't come up. Having said that, there is about 100 to 200 times as much nicotine in hookah smoke as in a cigarette. As for people who smoke hookah, they wind up consuming 100 to 200 times more nicotine. Nicotine is the bad guy here. It's not tobacco per se. It's not smoking per se. It's nicotine, which is highly addictive, and then which causes significant social problems later on when people get sick, when they get lung cancer, they get throat cancer. My dad suffered from both. So that's the bad guy. Now, initially, I thought this was an either or choice, but I spent a lot of time reading about different cities that have very, very strong anti-smoking laws where hookah is thriving because they use steam stones. And yes, steam stones have glycerin. Believe me, the flavorants that are in shisha, hookah tobacco, are equally sweet and sugar-based. And the real culprit, not to get into the weeds, the real culprit is the charcoal that's used to burn the steam stones. Anyway, the point is, there are a number of cities, including San Francisco, Pride of the Mediterranean. Go up and enjoy and Pride of the Mediterranean. There's no nicotine in those hookah products, and people are having a great time. So to me, I thought there was a pretty elegant compromise where we could permit society to be the welcoming place and yet not get people hooked on nicotine. And I'm sorry, I do think it's worse for kids under 21 to get hooked. I don't think it's so great for a 22-year-old to get hooked, or a 24-year-old, or a 26-year-old. So I'm not a fan of nicotine. And I think you can run your business without it. And I think Pride of the Mediterranean is running its business without it. And I guess if I lose this vote 3-2, I would still challenge you to run it without nicotine and see where it gets you. Because for one thing, you'll have clients who live longer. So that's where I would have come out on this compromise. I would not let the county permit program, with due respect, be the tail wagging our dog. We need to decide what's best for our community, what makes us a welcoming place, and but also what keeps people safe and healthy. And that's the basis on which I'm making this decision, at least for me, in casting this vote. I don't know if that changes anybody on the affirmative's mind. But I won't put you on the spot. We can just go ahead and vote, because there are a lot of people here for trees, and we need to pay attention to the people who want to talk about the tree ordinance too. What's that? Sorry. Oh, Donna, there we go. Sorry. Madam
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Yeah, yes, no, I mean, and first of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for doing the research and offering essentially a compromise. I really hope that at least there would be an option for two, in this lounge, like the option to do this or do that if you didn't want to consume hookah. And I liked Councilman Ortiz's recommendation and also Councilman Peterson's about the education. The issue I have is the slippery slope about, as me sitting up here legislating, what is and what is not harmful. We also know alcohol is incredibly harmful. It causes abuse, domestic abuse. There's lots and lots of issues with alcohol. It's 21 and over. And I'm just a little worried about, for me, just opening up that conversation. So I think you make up a great point, and I'd like to support it in terms of offering, having the, requesting that, and anyone who were to permit or be a part of this process, if we choose to go forward and allow it, would look at other alternatives and provide people other alternatives that are nicotine free.
Councilmember, thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Councilmember Ortiz.
I want to take that one step further. I think that's a great thought. we could say yes to the exemption with the condition that they have to offer the
Steam stone.
steam stones. And that has to be an available option for their patrons so that, because I'll tell you guys, eventually that's where you're gonna go. Because at some point, it might not be tonight, but at some point that's gonna change and you're gonna have to look for an alternative because this, I promise you, at some point that's gonna change. So even if we approve the exemption today, it won't be there for a long time. So I think that getting your patrons used to the steam stones was going to get you guys prepared for when another council, or maybe even this one, wants to make the change. So I like the idea. I think if we pass it with the requirement that they have to have the steam stones as an alternative, I feel very comfortable about it.
Councilmember Beach.
Well, I certainly would be in favor of that. I'm sorry we didn't have 3 votes to say that we should lead on this issue and keep people healthier longer. Having said that, I do like the idea, whether that was Vice Mayor's idea to limit the number of future establishments. And it sounds like the city attorney said, we can't just do it for one, because then we're basically spot zoning and we're saying we like society and nobody else is allowed to come into the city. But maybe we limit it to 2 and then we can reevaluate at a future time if we want to expand it and become a capital of hookah. We could, grow it if we want to. I would also hope that as we look and evaluate a year from now, our smoking ban, on Broadway that's temporary and downtown, I hope we will really look at just evaluating how it's impacted neighbors, especially now that part of society is opening up to open air again, with the extra space. So it's actually an outdoor patio. And let's, really pay attention to how smoking, not just there, but everywhere in outdoor patios is being received in the community. And then we can make an educated decision a year from now if we need to relook at that. So, but I would be in favor of limiting additional expansion of establishments.
And you're suggesting 2 would be the.
Yeah, I guess if I, but
Yes.
Mr. City Attorney, do we have any guidance on that?
I think 2 is fine. 2 is fine. You can also limit the amount of time that people can, if we create the permitting program, we could close off applications for hookah at a certain point too. So that's something that would be an option.
Yes, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Building off of that, because I do like the idea of encouraging society and any other institution down the road to offer both choices. I'm wondering about the legality, though, of forcing some level of education and financial contribution by the establishments as part of our permit process that could also help fund some of the monitoring and enforcement. Yep.
Something complicated.
So I will chime in, and maybe if the assistant city attorney has some other thoughts, he can chime in as well. But certainly I think that any fees that we have towards the program, so fees are supposed to be used for the actual city's cost of conducting the transaction, right? Of issuing the permit, doing any monitoring, that sort of thing. Anything beyond that, I'd have to take a strong look at to make sure that if we were to use it beyond the administrative costs of providing the program, that we're not running afoul of Prop 218 type issue.
Okay.
So that would require a lot more research to look into that issue.
Yeah, and I would humbly suggest that if we wanted to tax the purveyors of tobacco, we really ought to tax everybody who sells tobacco for.
Yeah, I wouldn't limit it just to a hookah permit, but anything that's related to the distribution of that products that have tobacco.
I think that's for a later day, but an interesting idea. Any other comments? I would like to do a lightning round on number of licenses. Councilmember Beach has suggested 2. Does anybody have any different feelings about that, just so that we can give staff clear guidance for the next phase? Yes.
If I could
Councilmember
comment,
Ortiz.
I'm in favor of 2. That makes sense. I, for some reason, was thinking we needed to go a little higher than that, but 2 works for me. I would only add the condition that there's a certain distance between the 2 establishments. That's the only thing I would want.
As you're discussing this, I was going to say it would be good to clarify for the tobacco retailer permit programming, if you'd like to generally parallel the county's ordinance other than what we're talking about here, because that's something that we do want to take that direction. And then one extra nuance. We've been talking essentially about hookah and shisha in the on-site consumption perspective, and I know that's how it's been briefed in the staff report. Just confirming that we're not saying that someone can sell hookah tobacco from a retail store. It is just
It's on-site consumption only.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm supportive of 2. Although I was thinking the alignment to the cannabis program that we established, and maybe that's a precedent, but at the same time, I'm fine with 2.
I am too. So,
2. I'm in agreement with 2 as well. Personally, I'd like to see them divided geographically, one on, with one over toward the hoteliers and the new development going on over there, and one on this side. But I'm flexible. And the reason I don't think Councilman Stevenson, we would align it with the cannabis is the cannabis was distribution only.
Okay.
No consumption.
Fair enough.
I agree with that. I don't think we need to vote, do we? I think it's pretty clear where the consensus, where the majority is. Is that right? Or do you want to vote?
No, we don't need a vote. So just so that I'm clear as the staff is taking this. So what I'm hearing is that the council is willing to consider an ordinance that would allow for an exception to our flavored tobacco ordinance to allow for hookah on-site consumption only, but only 2 such establishments would be permitted. That the council would like to see location requirements as part of that. And so we'll think about that as well. And then I think that we're also hearing support for a local tobacco permit program. Is that
yeah, so that people can lose their permit if they, yeah.
Great.
And I would suggest that different business districts might be the way to think about dividing up the licenses.
Great. I'd like to remind that there was one part where we're talking about requiring them to have the
Steam stones. Have a non-nicotine alternative.
Okay.
No, not option, alternative. And I'm sorry, yes, I guess it's the same thing. There has to be on the menu a non-nicotine, well-described, non-nicotine based smoking product.
And just for my final clarification, the rest of the model ordinance of the county should be paralleled as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, they did a lot of good work.
Yeah.
At a minimum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we have everything that we need then for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody on both sides of this issue. It was really hard for a lot of reasons, and obviously you can see people had different priorities and weighted things differently. But what I really appreciate is the civility from all sides on this, and let's keep moving forward. All right, now we're talking about trees. I'd welcome our city arborist to get us kicked off on the next big issue.
Thank you, Mayor Brownrigg, fellow council members. I know it's been a long night here, but we do have one more important issue. I want to first start by thanking you for your patience as we've bringing this to the public arena here. We have several members of our community that have shared their opinions with us, and we're doing our best to incorporate those thoughts. This process actually started back in 2018 under a different city attorney's office, different city arborist. It got shelved for a number of reasons, significant tree issues going on, COVID. We still have significant tree issues going on. I really want to thank our city attorney's office and especially our assistant city attorney Spansale for keeping us righted here and on the path. So here we are. We were able to present on November 2nd to the Beautification Commission. It was our first public discussion on concepts related to what ideas we have related to how we can modernize our code. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So why do we need to update our code here? I know they're loud back there. I'll talk a little louder. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? It's not that our current code is broken. It's just that it hasn't really kept pace with what the industry has. There's been several developments over the years. We have elements of our tree code that haven't been touched in 25 or as many as 52 years now. A lot has changed in the industry. We've learned a lot on how to better retain mature trees for the benefit of our community, and again, following those industry practices. Additionally, at present, we have a 1-to-1 ratio for replacement. You're going to hear this example a lot. I'll talk about a 100-foot tall redwood tree or a 100-year-old redwood tree. Putting in some little flowering Japanese maple is not going to do it. We need the large trees. We need to replace what's being taken out of the urban forest for whatever the approved reason is. There's also some limited tools. It'd be best if we could codify some of these abilities available to staff in order to address the tree retention as well as the tree removal permit program. And unfortunately, in the most egregious of cases, the current penalties haven't really kept pace as a deterrent. So we're looking at some options there. If you could go to the next slide, Megan. Thank you. So we've generally collected these concepts in 5 different areas. One is just updating the terms to be what modern terms are used and defining roles within the city. Typically, the director is referred to as a park and rec director and the city arborist, very much interchangeable. But we also have other departments that are affected by our tree ordinance. We have our community development and we have public works in the city right of way as well. So trying to identify what the roles of those different departments are. We also want to address development. This is something that we've heard significantly from in the community, the idea that, we remove trees in the name of development no matter what. There's definitely more work that needs to occur on the staff side to understand what some of these ministerial or entitlement approvals are at the state level. Sometimes they supersede what our desires are at the community level in terms of retention. So we need to play with that a little bit and learn more. We also want to look at established criteria for removing trees. There's a lot of reasons people bring an application of a tree removal to Parks and Recreation. I have to say we've borrowed heavily from some of our neighbors and what they've improved their tree code over the last 5 years or so. And we have some concepts here that we'd like to share. Again, I mentioned this replacement requirement. We really want to beef up not only the quantity of trees that need to go in, but also the size of the trees. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then again, the penalty portion, looking at also including the potential for criminal penalties in the most egregious of cases. Next slide, please. So again, terms and roles. We borrow heavily from ANSI and ISA. Those are the primary organizations that are involved with development of safety standards and industry practices. A lot of these have been incorporated into OSHA as well in order to protect worker safety and again, retain these large trees. We want to talk about the roles and who does what within the city. We heavily rely upon the Beautification Commission as the first level when it comes to the appeals and the review of what we are doing in the urban forest. We want to talk about the city manager a little bit. And I'll talk a little bit more about that further as in a positive manner. We also want to talk about the emergency authority of the city. As you all know, significant winter that we dealt with, and I know we received a lot of criticism, but it's important that we act prudently in order to protect life and safety in those emergency situations. Next slide, please. Development. Burlingame has certainly seen its share, and we're continuing to evolve. And what we want to do is we want to be able to prioritize tree retention to incentivize development, retention of trees during the development process. How best to go about that? Different communities do that in different ways. As I mentioned, we did some heavy research with cities of Sacramento, Pasadena, Santa Barbara, more locally Menlo Park and Palo Alto, and we've been borrowing heavily on these concepts of how to improve and address these areas. One of the things that we really want to codify is this idea of tree protection zones, TPZs, during construction. It's, oftentimes these trees, oh, you just park a tractor, you grade around it, all this kind of stuff, and the tree starts to die over time. We really want to have that addressed in the forefront of the process. One of the challenges we have is who is doing that. I mentioned the Beautification Commission, and one of our commissioners was absolutely, we need to keep this at the beautification level. But it might actually be more appropriate at the planning level. They are the folks who are evaluating the entire development proposal and have the ability to suggest alternative designs or different research. But we want to be out in the forefront of that in the beginning. If there's at all an idea that a tree, protected size tree, might be removed or affected by the development, we want to get that in the forefront with an independent arborist report and appraisal, the valuation of the tree. Again, I mentioned increasing the planting requirements, not these small little trees that aren't going to do a lot for our community. We want the heavy lifters that are going to be sustainable. But sometimes during the development process, there isn't room to plant as many trees that are required. We want to be able to provide alternative planting locations, or perhaps a fee associated with that could be deposited into our annual tree fund so we can plant elsewhere for a community benefit if it's not allowed on the property. And we want to authorize our staff to be able to stop work if these measures and provisions that were established in the planning process or established in the tree protection process are not being followed. It's a very serious matter for us. Next slide, please. So the removal criteria. Thank you, Menlo Park, for doing the heavy lifting. I'll go to the next slide. Not yet. We'll go into some specifics there, but
I was going to ask, which part of Burlingame is this picture?
This is not Burlingame. There's a lot of reasons that Parks and Recreation see why somebody wants to remove the tree. Most of the time it's very obvious. It's very legit. The tree is dying. It has a significant structural issue, significant decay. There's no discussion, but sometimes somebody just doesn't like the tree. And that's a little challenging because, the person's living there with the tree, they're saddled with the maintenance of it, but this is a mature tree that's producing a lot for a community. In those situations, we believe there should be public discussion, but we do believe that there's some that there shouldn't, may not be as relevant in the appeal process. Speaking of the appeal process, at present, we are looking at the Beautification Commission, and then if the applicant or appellant appeals above that, it goes to the city council, yourselves. There is a fee for that. At present, there is no fee at the beautification level, yet the same amount of work and staff time go into preparing. We believe there should be a fee associated with that, in line with what the appeal fee would be for the city council. From the staff perspective, beyond an appeal from the Beautification Commission, it's our thought that it should actually go to the city manager's office as more of an interpretation of, did we follow the process? As you folks know, we've been here a few times here, and a lot of times they end up being neighbor issues. And I don't know if that's the best use of resources from the city council to hear those. If we could go to the next slide. So what are some thoughts here on the removal criteria? If a tree is dead or a tree is mostly dead, we don't believe that that is something that should be appealable. As a matter of fact, in practice, that is something that hasn't really occurred through the Parks Division in terms of public notification. If the tree's dead, there really shouldn't be a debate about that. This is really just establishing it as these are the rules rather than just what our practice was. When we get to the tree risk assessment rating or the tree health rating, that becomes a little bit more interpretive, and that's where we request the applicant to obtain an independent arborist report and provide the detail that would agree with the removal. The challenge we have with that is, just like a plumber, a mechanic, a doctor, different professionals can have different opinions. You have employed me as your city arborist. In those situations that the city arborist agrees with the professional designation, we do not believe that should be subject to the appeal process. Our commissioners, while well-intended, do not have that same level of training And I can leave that to our legal team to talk about what kind of liability that would open up for the city. On the other hand, there are times where I disagree with an independent arborist report, and I push back and have those conversations or deny the tree removal application based upon my own interpretation of the data. That would probably be another legal conversation on what that opens up the city to. Other cities have lists of non-desirable species. So these are trees, for whatever reason, are less desirable. Maybe they have a propensity of a particular disease. They are a nuisance, they drop fruit. It could be a number of different reasons. But that's something that we thought would be a good addition for the city of Burlingame if we have a list of trees that we've vetted and approved, that they would be also approved for removal without appeal. However, unlike some other communities, we still believe that should be part of the permit process. Some other communities, you can take these tree species out and don't need to file for a permit. The reason why we believe that's important is the whole replacement process, right? Even if this is an undesirable species, it's still contributing to the urban forest. So we want to make sure that we can have some equitable replacement. One of the things I didn't mention in the beginning when we talked about the terms is the update to the definition of the protected tree. We also want to include these tree replacements or these tree requirements, whether it's through development or tree removal, as now protected trees. What we have now is it's based on size. Sometimes, depending on the species, it may never get to be a protected species size. So that's something very critical that we think is a great addition. It was actually very much applauded by the public at the Beautification Commission. But one of the challenges is how do we track it? We do have an asset management system, so we can easily enter the data in there. That's not a problem. We don't have the bandwidth to continually check. It's probably more like our code enforcement where we get a complaint, we can go back and verify, hey, the tree's no longer there. And we have it codified that you have to replace this tree. You know, it's not an easy lift, but it is something of a starting point there. And then the other non-appealable action would be if it's causing verifiable structural damage. We get this a lot and we require a structural engineer's report, and most people don't end up going that route. But when we do receive those verifiable structural reports, we also don't believe that that's something that should be appealable. You're talking about someone's home or structure. This is not driveway, this is not pathways, this is an actual building. That's a big ask for a community member to have to address whatever that structural issue is in order to retain the tree. So what is appealable? Anything else? We do get some that interfere with utilities. We believe that is a reason that something should be appealed. But any other reason, and I know it seems very vague, but it is broad. This tree blocks my sunlight. It drops leaves, it drops fruit, whatever that nuisance might be. Those should definitely be discussed in the public forum. One member of the public spoke at the Beautification Commission and believed that we don't go far enough to remove trees in effort to promote solar, right? Looking at green energy. We do have an existing policy that says if the solar panels are there first, we can prune the tree to keep below, but if the tree is there first, the solar does not trump. So that is something that was suggested that we take a look at as we're looking for alternative energy resources. Next slide, please. This is a big one here, a big change. So again, I talked about my 100-foot or my 100-year-old redwood tree. You now know my favorite tree. When that is approved for removal for whatever reason, planting a flowering plum tree is not going to do the same lifting for a community. So we heavily borrowed from Menlo Park on this. And it's really based upon DBH, right? The size of the tree. So why all these different options? What we heard from some commissioners and the public as well is really at the 20-inch diameter level and above, there should not be a 15-gallon. That's too small of a tree. The reason that I've still left it there for conversation is because, statistics show that the smaller the container size of the tree, the quicker it naturalizes, the lower the mortality rate. Really, in a few years, a 15-gallon tree can catch up, species dependent, can catch up to the larger boxes. It also puts more trees in our urban forest than one large box tree. And there are also some situations that are very challenging. You know, this might be a sloped hillside behind a house. To be able to get a 48-inch box back there would be incredibly challenging. You're talking about a crane to plant a tree. So these are some options why we had those in there, but I understand there's a lot of options. One of the other things too is, and this is presently allowed in the code, for the Parks and Recreation Director or the city arborist to adjust the planting level based upon site conditions. Perhaps there are several existing trees, perhaps there isn't room. So we talked about the alternative sites, but one of the things we could look at is a proration of what that fee would be. So if you're only able to plant half what the required planting would be, well, maybe you pay half of the appraisal tree of the tree that is approved for removal, and that would go again into our annual replacement fund. Next slide, please. So the penalty for portion, you know, this is the part we don't do a lot, fortunately. Most people know the rules or play by the rules, but we do have some situations where folks don't, and it becomes very challenging. You know, one of the things that we want to look at here is, as I mentioned, being able to criminally prosecute the most egregious of cases. If you go to the next slide, we have a couple examples of things that come up or could come up. So this happens a lot. The first one where a property owner removes a dead pine tree, right? Tree's dead. They didn't think about it. They called the tree company. They want it gone before winter. Fine. We would have approved it anyway. So we educate the person. We have them still apply for the permit. And that way we can get that whole replacement tree back into the urban forest. In the second example, this is something where somebody does a really poor pruning job. Redwood trees should never be reduction pruned like that. But we know redwood tree, it will still produce for our community. You don't have to remove the whole tree, but you know, the community lost a certain portion of that tree. So that would be a proration of a fee that could go back into our annual replacement fund so we could plant more trees elsewhere first. The last one is probably the most egregious. This is somebody who applies for a permit. We say no, and they say, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. In those situations, you knew the rules. We told you no for this reason, and you thumbed your nose at us anyway. We want our city attorney's office to be able to have the tools, if appropriate, to seek treble damages of the value of the tree, as well as potentially prosecute on a criminal basis. So with that, anything? Okay, good. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm sure you all have a.
May I ask a question on that?
Yeah,
one?
please.
Yeah. That last option, as far as like criminal or prosecution by the city attorney's office, is that not a tool in our toolbox right now? Without, like, do we have that option?
We don't have that option in the tree ordinance right now. No.
Okay, so it would just be a fine, like a code enforcement fine if someone took down and a slap on the wrist. Okay.
I mean, you could go for a criminal infraction for a violation of our code, but since we don't specifically address that it could be prosecuted by a misdemeanor, we don't have the ability to do that today.
Okay. Councilmember Ortiz.
And I have another question that, as far as requiring the permit with payment, what if they say I'm not paying?
Then we would file a civil suit to recover the damages that we've lost.
Okay.
That's something that is available generally today, but we want to specifically.
But there's no way to just lien the house.
Not that I'm aware of right now. That's certainly something we can look in and report back when we come back in front of you next.
Thank you.
Carry on.
Okay, if we could move. So I'm sure you all have thoughts. We threw this out there for our commission too, just kind of get the creative juices flowing. But you know, what do you think about these reasons for removal? The criteria, should they be appealable? Should they not be appealable? That is a somewhat of a departure from what our practice has been. As I mentioned, with dead trees or trees that have more than 50% devoid of leaf tissue, live tissue, or if there's a significant structural defect, those typically do not go through the appeal process. You know, what we're looking at here, probably the biggest shift would be if the city arborist agrees with an independent arborist report, should we subject that to the appeal process or not? And I'm sure our friends in the community have some ideas that they'd love to share with you as well. Scott, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something? Okay. Okay. So the replacement requirements, does that seem significant? Because it is significantly more than what we're doing now. In speaking with the city arborist for Menlo Park, it becomes incredibly challenging. You talk about perhaps somebody who's lived in their home 50 years and their tree just happens to die because whatever reason. Now, not only are they paying potentially $10,000 to remove the tree, but they're also on the hook for paying the value of the tree or the replacement into the tree replacement fund. So these are some challenges that we need to work through. Many months ago, I shared a presentation here on what we are doing in our urban forest. And Vice Mayor Colson said, gosh, I wish there was some mechanism where, we could help pay for some of the maintenance on these trees for people who can't, or one of our community members shared with us, can't we incentivize people who are maintaining these large trees somehow? I'll leave that to our legal gurus here, but perhaps this tree replacement fund may have additional funding that would be available as a tool or mechanism for that. And then again, the penalties, what are you thinking about that?
Just before we turn it over to you to turn it over to the public, I did want to make sure that everyone in the room knows we are still very much at the early stage of this, and we are trying to have this conversation, and we wanted to make sure staff and our wonderful city arborist here, who I'm always in awe of during his presentations, we are here to listen. We're here to listen to the council. We're here to listen to the public. So I just wanted to make sure no action is requested of you tonight other than to discuss and provide a little bit of insight of what you're thinking about these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spansale. Does that conclude our staff presentation?
Yes.
I am going to exert the privilege of the chair. And before we go to commentary or questions from council, I'd like to invite up Leslie McQuaid, who is a longtime community member and who is battling some terrible bug. So we want to let Leslie get home.
All right, I'll be fat. I won't touch anything. Don't start me yet. Okay, well, first of all, I've lived here over 50 years. I bought my first house at 833 Linden Avenue over by that little new train park or whatever it is. And I now live closer to Mercy. But I got really involved. I bought here because the trees. I was like 25 years old. And I bought here because of trees. And I got really involved with the Beautification Commission at that point. Okay. In those days, the Beautification Commission and the Beautification Committee and the Planning Commission were more closely united. And so we would hear all the time something coming through planning that we would go out, and all the members of our committee would go out and check out this, questionable tree or developer that wanted to do more on the land than the land held. That's not really what's happening today, and I think that's probably the most important thing I want to present tonight. I'll come back later when I feel better, but is that I think we need to work with planning. And I'm not sure, Council Mayor Brownrigg, you might have been on it at some point, but not at the very beginning of that. Maybe
When
so.
planning and beautification work together?
Yeah. Well, okay, on the Planning Commission was Ralph Osterling.
Yeah, I was.
And he was a landscape consultant. And to this day, I'll remember, somebody actually asked me, would I come over and take his position? I said, I don't have the expertise that he has, so no, I will not do it, even though I'd love to. But he was there with an eye for the tree, and he was on planning, and he would make sure that yellow or orange tape was put around, because first of all, homes weren't as big as they are now. And so if things are going to be a remodel, or even if it's a new construction, he would say, okay, there's, you have to protect the tree that's on here. Or you are planning in your design, you're planning on planting, 3 trees. You have to make sure that you account for the fact that these trees grow and that they will have drainage ditches. And so he was really, really good to be on there. And we have yet to have a consultant on the Planning Commission. And I think that was a big mistake. So I was on the commission when, and I think they all know this, Steve Porter, and he was the arborist, Laurel Hesselgren, Will McGowan, who do you know? I don't know if you know any of these people. Martha Benson, Jill Lauder. Anyway, we were all on that together. And as a team, we seriously looked at what was coming up at planning, which is not, I don't think, is not, I don't feel well to stay for another minute. Anyway, I think we need to go back to letting the two groups communicate with each other. Okay. And the only other thing I want to say is that I mentioned this in a beautification meeting, that I own a home in Carmel, my cousin owns a home in Del Mar, and my very best friend owns a home in Portola Valley. And it's an act of God to be able to remove a tree from any of those places. And they're very exclusive, beautiful communities. And I'll go home and get better.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McQuaid. So I did want to let Leslie get home to recuperate, but I'll bring it back. We'll have public comment in a couple of minutes, but let me bring it back on to council for questions of staff before we go to public comment. Are there any?
One question was, thank you, Mr. Mayor, was you looked at some of the heavy lifting that Menlo Park has instituted, but the question about somebody living here for 60 years and now facing a dead tree and incurring that cost, how did they roll out that program? Was it a complete, pendulum shift? Did they institute phases of that program? Just curious.
To my knowledge, it was not I don't know what their previous reiteration was. I believe this came out in 2020. The city arborist that I've been speaking with has only been there approximately 6 months, 8 months maybe now. So she was very much new to the process, and I basically asked her point blank, what are parts of your code that are challenging for you don't like? And that was the specific example, is, enforcing that. I don't want to call it a penalty. It's not a penalty. The fee associated with removing this large tree from the urban forest, if it had just died on its own, right? It's not a voluntary removal. They need to remove it for safety reasons, and now they're on the hook just like any other potential removal reason for the replacement cost. But yeah, I could definitely do further research on that.
I'll save comments for later, but I'll form a comment in the form of a question, which is I appreciated and agree with comments made by Commissioner Pfaff in the email today, which is there are a lot of sticks in this approach, and probably have to be, but what about carrots? And in particular, I really do believe that people who are scraping and building a new house, they have a lot of options. And I think we are, let me phrase it as a question, are we too hospitable to them, allowing them to remove trees so that they can build? And I say that as somebody who went toe to toe with a developer in order to get him to protect redwood trees, and he didn't want to do it, but we made him do it. I'm glad we did. So I think we should be more robust in thinking about how do we incent, how do we make sure if they need more square footage, then we relax a front setback requirement or something like that. I think the importance of the urban forest is more important than the average front setback.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that really wasn't a question.
No, but that's definitely something that we can consider as we're looking at these amendments. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the great staff report, a lot of great information, and the presentation as well. In your presentation, you mentioned how we kind of evaluate trees that are at risk, a tree assessment rating. And I remember there's some very thoughtful members of the community that have explored that, or taught me a little. I know enough to be dangerous, but there's different kinds of assessment ratings, right? They're not all created equal. Can you talk to us about the different levels of assessment and how we're approaching that, and
Yeah, there are multiple evaluation methods throughout the industry. It used to be the tree hazard evaluation form, which is still around, but it's kind of evolved. ISA has a program called TRAC. It's Tree Risk Assessment Qualification. That tends to be more of the independent arborist reports that I see. Both myself and our supervisor, Park Supervisor Burrow, we are qualified in that same methodology. Sometimes I see what I would interpret as an unreasonable assessment from an independent arborist. Basically, it's taking the likelihood of a part of a tree to failure and the likelihood of impact, and that's how you come up with your risk assessment. Then you look at what your mitigation measures are from there to reduce that risk. If you prune the tree, if you cabled the tree, if you did different things, does that increase or reduce the risk? Most of the time, it's a risk reduction to a level that is acceptable. In some situations, you can do all these things in the world and it's not going to reduce that risk to an acceptable level. What is acceptable? I mean, I have my risk level based upon my knowledge here of the city of Burlingame. A property owner or a tree owner, they have their own level of risk assessment, and it's kind of coming together with those things.
So it sounds like there's a pretty rigorous industry standard that independent arborists are qualified in, you are qualified in, different ways to interpret it, mitigation considered.
Yes, yeah.
But it's
I mean, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but
No, it's okay. I don't need the weeds.
okay.
I'm familiar with risk assessments enough again to have a sense of it, but that it's thorough is, I think, the heart of the matter.
Yes.
The other question I have that just gave me a little bit of pause of, things that are maybe not appealable, like the idea of undesirable species. Just like, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
People have different opinions. What's desirable and undesirable?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to offend anyone. So there are certain species, like a black acacia. They're a tree that prolific cedar, sometimes considered as a weed because of their proliferation of seeding. Perhaps they attract, not that, a privet tree would attract birds that are, dropping the seeds throughout the city, and it's causing a weed problem or a growth problem. I mean, there's a list. There is
out there.
I mean, yes, there are. Each community values different things. So, we could go on the UCIPM website and say, hey, which trees are weedy? And they would say, hey, black walnut, don't plant these anywhere. So we could add that to our list. Our neighbors, pretty much if it's a non-native and grows very well in the area or naturalizes in the area, they are absolutely, this is a non-desirable species and can be removed without permit. That's Palo Alto. So
non-native.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's different
I just
approach it, and as we sort of
absolutely
conversation continues.
Yeah, in January we are hoping to bring a whole street tree list to the Beautification Commission. But just to be clear, the majority of trees we plant here in the area are not native, right? But we have one tree, Coast Live Oak, that is on our approved street tree list that is native. The other 20 trees, 30 trees are non-native.
All right, thanks. I don't want to tie up too. I want to hear from the public.
Yeah, I do too. At some point though, I do feel like trees should become naturalized. Like, eucalyptus is non-native. I mean, how long does it take, right? But I did have one other, question, which is, there was a homeowner I became familiar with who purchased her home and then found that she was really quite allergic to one of the trees. And where do we put that on the scale of allowable?
I guess let's start with whether it's a city-owned tree or it's a private
tree.
So if it's a private tree and it's of protected size,
yeah,
that would be an appealable situation according to what we have in our criteria now.
Okay, so she could do it. She just have to go through the permit process and somebody could appeal it.
Yep.
Okay.
We have one just like that? Didn't we have one just like that where somebody was really allergic to, yeah.
Yeah, I think we did. I think that's what I'm thinking of actually. And we didn't let her do it. We didn't let her take it out. All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. Who'd like to join us? Please come on up.
I love this guy. Anyway, well, you see I'm going to try to be as quick as possible. You saw my comments come in. I've shared similar ones with Richard. I feel very concerned about this one addition of so-called undesirable in communities that they're called nuisance trees, or they're called, I mean, they have all kinds of names. And I think it's an effort to streamline processes in these cities, and so that they don't have to go through all these steps. And while there may be some reasons to remove certain trees, there are maybe more to keep them. And there's just a current, you mentioned privet. Privets spread all over, but they can be very beautiful in confined areas. And there was a big fight over in just happening now over in Woodlake, where a homeowners association or something, they approved removal, and the people who live there, the HOA, appealed it so that they could have their trees, and they won. But I feel, first of all, very protective of our heritage groves, and they are CEQA protected, by the way. Easton is now declared by default as assumed CEQA protected from Caltrans. It's an adjacent grove. El Camino, of course, we already know about the Frankart Grove. So the point is, there needs to be public input. If something is not appealable, there's no public input. And I feel like that has always been a process of our city, regardless of what the issue was. There needs to be open conversation about it. And if trees need to come out, there's a process where historical and heritage groves, such as Easton, we just had this discussion, need to be replaced with not exactly the same species, but one that mimics what's there, and could also be of the same species, the same type or a relative. So I don't want to start something where that whole process is no longer compliant, first of all, with our new general plan, which we've just, I mean, that's written all over heritage groves. Everything needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis. It's very specifically written. We just did that. So I would prefer not to have to revisit that. Also, we have fought for other so-called annoying trees. There's a big Brazilian pepper, gorgeous, over on Bayswater and Myrtle, that was going to be felled as part of this enormous development up the street from me. And this is before I was planning commissioner. And a group of us came and fought to keep that tree under such a thing, because it is on a common list where it's causing no trouble at all. That could have been removed, and we would have a far less attractive development. So that is largely my problem with this. And I have also issues with, similar to Leslie, that the Planning Commission is somewhat handicapped in that we don't always have a tree interested person on there. I happen to be on there now. I love trees, and I hope I can contribute, but that is not always going to be the case. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pfaff. Thank you for your service. Yes, please, Ms. Lang. Take your time.
Well, I came tonight for both reasons, but particularly thank you very much for educating us on all of the questions and decisions that have to go into making all of these decisions. But what came to mind, what I'm interested in, is the relationship between the urban forest and the wild urban interface, because those are really, I think, something that, I don't know if we're talking about a policy tonight. We're talking about how to make decisions and how to integrate all the knowledge about trees. But with the fact that we have bearing down upon us climate change, and particularly sea level rise, we're surrounded, I'm looking at this not just from a visionary viewpoint and what's going to be beautiful, but what we need to really think about when somehow the guidance of a lot of these decisions really need to bring into mind the interface. Because we've been lucky this year, we haven't had any wildfires. But it's a fact, we don't need to go on about it, we all know that. And I think I'm torn between always having something that is beautiful and having something that can be implementable and easy also, you know, for all of you to make policy. So that's why I'm here tonight. I'm really particularly care about the wildfire urban WEA, as it's called. So a little bit tired tonight, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
And, the one final thing actually is this comes back to something that's historic. I mean, we're back to tree roots in the streets. And I think that we need to really take just a very particular look at how all of this affects all these infrastructure decisions, not development, but our roadways. And that's kind of a practical thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Come on up. Here comes some practical advice.
Yeah. My name's Alvin Began. I've been a Burlingame resident for about 45 years. I first of all would like to thank the city arborist for that perspective and a great presentation. I think what's implied in many are suggestions that I would agree with. I would like to step back and look at a bigger picture of kind of the vision. And I'll risk being labeled as a tree hugger or indicating that I think trees have rights, neither of which I'd be insulted by. But I think that I would like to see any ordinance have a preamble that states that trees are deemed to be protected and should exist unless otherwise proven that they are a hazard in some way. Okay, I think that we have to really strengthen the process, strengthen the criteria. I understand that we need to think about things like danger, liability, and that kind of thing, and I think there are ways to do that. But I would like to see the tenor and the vision of the ordinance to be slanted in terms of the trees rather than other factors. I wrote a longer piece, which I probably sent it to the whole council, sent it to the arborist, that has a lot of detail, and I think Brian's going to cover some of that also. But the one piece that I would urge you to consider in terms of what you prioritize is development, and what I think has been noted in some writing as economic value. Is that the priority, or are trees the priority? And I would suggest that trees are the priority for a whole lot of reasons that I think can be articulated very well, and I think were articulated to some extent. And development just has to take a back seat to it if we're serious about living up to our motto, the city of trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'd like to second, I'm Brian Ben, Burlingame resident. I'd like to second what Mr. Began described, and we collaborated on the write-up that was submitted. I feel very strongly that Burlingame's big trees in particular, I'm thinking of trees that are 2 to 3 feet in diameter and maybe twice as tall as a 2-story house in Burlingame, they really stand out. And in my view, they make Burlingame particularly beautiful and somewhat unique. And I think those biggest of our trees should be treated as a special category of protected trees. Unfortunately, we seem to be losing many of those trees. I know we've lost a number of them recently, a couple big redwoods on Bernal. There just are not that many left around, relatively speaking. And I think now it's more important than ever that we be really, really good stewards of these big trees, particularly because we, face losing a big part of our public canopy, out of necessity, but that's going to happen and going to change the look of Burlingame for a generation. So we should protect our private big trees, in my view, as robustly as we possibly can. And right now we have a particular loophole in our process, a huge loophole. And you're familiar with it, I'm sure, but it's really what I would call a safety loophole. It's all too easy for an applicant to hire an arborist. And, as much as we like to think it's a totally, objective process and risk assessment, the arborists who are hired, although they're called independent arborists because they don't do removal work, they are really there to represent the applicant and are often highly biased in favor of the applicant's view. An alternative to that approach would be to have the applicant pay for the city to hire an arborist as the initial review of the tree. And I think that would, in support of what Mr. Began said, would change the dynamic from the outset quite considerably. The other loophole is often that, tree roots may be cracking the foundation of an old garage, and the applicant is annoyed by that or doesn't want to have to pick up after the tree. And so suddenly it becomes a safety issue. And we're too concerned about the tree, and our arborist says that the tree has an imperfection and the safety can't be guaranteed. And if that kind of report goes to the city arborist, it's very hard at that point for the city to refute that position. So flip it around, have the city conduct at the applicant's expense the first assessment. I think then empower the city arborist to really look at trees from the perspective of what tree is in reasonable health, and consider trees that are in reasonably good health to be safe, or safe, conditionally with some pruning, some maintenance. And then I'll just add a couple of quick things. Development really should go work around our biggest trees wherever absolutely possible, with the most narrow of exceptions. I think we should have reasonable economic incentives for the owners of private big trees, especially, to maintain those trees. That's obviously an important, very important part of keeping a safe canopy. So thank you, and appreciate your attention to that.
Mr. Bennett, thank you for that input that you two put together, which is very thoughtful. Any other commentary? Please come and join us. You don't have to fill out a card.
Well, I wrote in, so I wrote an email, so I guess you could dump the email, so I don't double. Hi, I'm Linda Ryan, from 1532 Drake. And I personally just have a visceral response to these big trees coming out. I just really can't stand it. And the two redwoods on Bernal it just broke my heart. And even every day I walk by and I think, God, why couldn't we have said to them, hey, trim it? Maybe there were two on the lot, so I kind of get part of it, but the trees look perfectly healthy. And I just wish we could come up with a way of just saying, okay, take out one of them, maintain the other one, just figure it out. Anyway, another thought I had was, instead of calling it the beautification committee, maybe we could call it the shade committee. Maybe we could be more current, because it doesn't feel, beautification feels a little corny, feels a little dated, and like you're planting flowers on the corner or something. So maybe shade committee, because climate change is here. We don't really have time to wait 10 years. We need to save the big trees or equal oxygen and protection and all that good stuff. So I really like, I like what you're doing here. I hope this doesn't get dropped. I think it got dropped about 8 years ago. And I hope that I'm not 70 the next time I have to come back.
We'll see, bro.
I'm willing to help, whatever ideas, whatever. Thank you. If you can get some of us involved to maybe do some of the research, please don't reinvent the wheel. These ordinances have been updated all over California. this should not take 3 years, right? Let's make it happen.
Let me ask a quick question. If a developer had a parcel and it had a big tree on it and he couldn't or she couldn't get the normal footprint of the house that Burlingame is used to building, would you let that person go to 3 stories so they were on a smaller footprint? You see the question? Like normally we limit houses to 30 feet, which is 2 stories.
Right.
So would you let the developer go to 3 stories in order to have a smaller footprint to protect the tree?
Good question. I mean, I think I'd have to see the, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. And I think it depends on where, most of the time, these bigger trees, the ones we fought and won, were always at the back of the lot. The latest one was over by OLA. There was a beautiful, beautiful redwood. It was a developer coming in from out of town. He wanted the tree out so he could put the garage right there. We said, no, 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 leave, put the garage. Anyway, we fought it and we won it. So, I mean, I think it's worth taking the time to really look at it, and maybe even in the planning department, that it didn't even need to get to people like Linda Ryan to fight it. Like, you could have just said no. And he got $4.5 million for the house anyway. And the rest of us appreciate the tree there, and it's doing all the good stuff for the environment. So I think maybe it should be in planning, some of that, because with SB 9 and 10 passing, we're all at risk of losing. I mean, I could end up having 4 houses next to me, and so could all of you. And I think the tree ordinance has to be set in stone.
Thank
you.
Thank you for being here. Any other comments? Okay. You have some, Alvin, I already made this mistake once, letting some. Okay, so noted. I know, I have to.
So we do have an email.
Yeah, let's hear from email. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ani and live at 1240 Cabrillo. I'm happy the tree ordinance is being updated after 5 decades to protect the trees in the city of trees. I agree with all the changes, would like for these ordinances apply to the city as well as the public for tree protection, removal, and replacement. Let's keep what's remaining of our canopy of trees. In addition, persons on the planning commission or on city council that is developing and flipping properties in Burlingame should recuse themselves from this conversation. This is a conflict of interest. And the other 2 emails I got, the individuals have shown up, so I won't read their email.
Great, but they're still part of the record and we appreciate it. Okay, unless there are any other public comments, I'll close the comment period. And so this is a conversation, as you said, and so you're looking for comments and conversation from council. So who'd like to go first and offer some thoughts to our city arborist?
I'd like to ask a favor, please. Can we put up, there was a slide where you had all the questions that you want us to address. We put that one up so I have a little guidance.
It'd be the last slide.
Just while you do that, I would say, as somebody who is a homeowner with a very large tree, which we love, and we definitely, I mean, it's expensive, and we are constantly being told, like, don't worry, it's a big bill, but we won't have to come back for 3 or 4 years, and 2 years later they're back because it's so healthy. So that's all great. But I would actually feel a little resentful if it got sudden oak death, if it died from sudden oak disease, and all of a sudden, sorry, I know you want to answer the questions and we'll let you.
No, I'm just saying my tree just had it.
So I would feel a little resentful if the city said, hey, your tree died a natural death and now you owe us a bunch of money. Like, wait, really? So I don't know, that one.
Valid argument. Absolutely.
Doesn't sit so well with me.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
And again, I just want to reiterate what Assistant City Attorney Spansel said. This is very much beginning stage.
Yeah.
There's nothing written. We're not coming to you with a code provision. Very much appreciate everyone's comments today and communicating with me, including criticisms of decisions made over the last year.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so I'm gonna, so what reason should a tree be allowed to be removed? I think that what we talked about here is trying to create a more expedient process for certain situations where it's obviously going to be approved, where the tree is dead, where the tree is, you know, a few other situations. And then on the other end of that, there's some that obviously we're going to have a hearing because that's the way it works. So what we need to do is figure out where's the line. And I think that Ms. Pfaff brought up some good points that if we're going to err in the side, we're going to keep it to the side of public hearings for the tree. So that's where I would lay on that. But I think, you know, that is kind of a moving target, and it can be adjusted. So once we do this, it's not final. We can always adjust it if we don't like what happened. What should be appealable? I guess it goes with what I just said. What authority should hear the appeals? Okay, and so that start getting a little tricky, because I liked your idea. There's certain things that is going to be appealed to the city manager. But then what if they want to go beyond that? And that's so, but I do trust that having an impartial person looking at it, and we could resolve a lot of issues without it being appealed all the way to city council. But with the understanding that, yes, we still need some to be appealed all the way to the city council, and I don't have a problem with that. Replacement requirements, I like your idea about exchanging a large tree for the few smaller ones where the location allows for that or doesn't allow for the big tree. And
I'm sorry, you're okay with smaller specimens in certain search situations?
in lieu of the bigger one,
Okay, more smaller one.
in case.
Smaller.
Not the sloping plot or something where it doesn't make sense to have the big one. Yes, I would be in favor of that. And the proposed penalty is prohibitive enough. I don't think so. I think because there's some people who are just flaunting this whole rule and they just do some crazy stuff, and I wish we could slap their hand a little harder than we were proposing, but I'll go along with these.
Thank you.
Who'd like to go next? Madam Vice Mayor, would you like to weigh in? You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm like small here, so I can't see. So I just have two clarification questions and then just a couple of comments. The first is, I do think we should understand how SB 9 works. And if somebody wants to build an ADU by right and it requires a tree to come down, I just want to understand that better. So maybe we can get a little more information about that down the road.
We definitely need to do more work with that. Yes.
Yeah, like I don't want the, state suing us as a thing. And then the second would be if I really want to understand a little more, if we deny a tree removal and then and it's because of it's dangerous or, some issue, and then the tree falls and just damages the home or kills somebody, what is our liability around that? So those are my two questions. And then I do appreciate pardon?
If I think our city attorney might want to answer that.
Oh, maybe he can right now. I'm sorry, I just can't see because they have the considerations up. So just guide me, please.
So that's a great point on the SB 9 and SB 10 and other ministerial approvals. That's something that we're going to deep dive into a little bit more. It is constantly changing, so it's something that we're trying to get a better grasp on. Sorry. In terms of liability, that's something that's always going to be a risk. That's something that we're always going to be thinking about. That's certainly an argument that would be made, and it's a stronger argument to someone if we had just denied their ability to take out a tree. So I think obviously every case is very dependent on the facts and the circumstances, and the city's always going to make sure that we act in the best interest and that we make the decisions that are for the public health and safety. But there's certainly an argument that's stronger should we did not make that denial or approval.
Okay, that's great. And then just, pardon? Yes.
Sorry, one more comment from Mr. Gina.
Excuse me, yeah, and to dovetail what the Assistant City Attorney just provided, there is a reviewing court would give deference to the city as long as it found that the city was acting reasonably in issuing the permit or deciding not to issue the permit. So if we are able to make a record that the city staff, in this case, the city arborist, exercised discretion within the bounds of his authority and acted reasonably as a result of, the evidence that was in there at the time, then the courts will generally side with the city in terms of any liability question. So it comes down to the city being able to prove that it acted in a reasonable manner when it decided to issue the permit or not issue the permit.
Thank you.
Great. And then I have sort of one sort of comment on that list, which you don't have to pull back up. And then just sort of one kind of concluding thought around Park and Rec. So with regard to the small tree, the ability to use a 15-inch box, interestingly, I'm doing some work right now with the SFPUC out at Flowley. They own a lot of land right at the front, and even they won't even, they want you to actually develop all your new trees from seedlings, because anything we plant, even oaks and enormous trees. And a lot of it has to do with what Rich said, and the notion of the health of the tree, and a small tree cared for and tended to will become a stronger, more likely to sustain, not to sustain, wind damage, rain damage, et cetera. So I don't have any problem with using a smaller tree, but I do think they should be protected in the same way that the large trees are. And that's the way you would get around that. And trees die. I just had a tree that was part of my planting scheme. And what we realized is just the light, the water conditions, and the soil conditions. It just one day, it just turned brown and died. No one could figure it out. So we're replanting with a different species to accommodate the, whatever soil things, so that when something dies or doesn't work out, we give the homeowner the opportunity to replant something big and something nice, but that will be more conducive to the environment. And then finally, with just regard to the, I really do like this notion of more incentives. And I'm wondering a couple things. One, private homeowner who wants to plant trees, I'm wondering if there'd be any way for us to wholesale, like people just put in every 6 months, like, I want to buy a tree. I want this tree. It's on our list. And if we could wholesale purchase trees, they're very, trees are just incredibly expensive. If you go to a local, nursery, you're probably going to pay 2 or 3 times compared to what you could get, the city could get wholesale. So is there any way for us to share in our discount purchasing volume, work to make some of our, provide opportunity for home buyers to purchase trees at better prices? And then to all the amazing people who came and spoke today in support of all the trees, we really need to find a way to help homeowners that cannot afford $10,000 to trim a redwood tree or an oak tree. As I've said many times, my neighbor has a big oak tree and a big redwood tree that both come over into my yard, and she simply cannot afford to maintain them. So I have to maintain them for both of us. And, it's, as the mayor points out, it can be on the cost of $10,000 to $20,000 a year for me to maintain those 2 trees. So there are plenty of people who cannot afford it. And I would love to see us work with our Park and Recreation Foundation, maybe create a sub-fund where we could specifically fundraise charitable donations to create some sort of a fund to really backfill and help people who want to maintain a tree but cannot afford it. And it could be means tested. They could have to be a care and fair person, or there could be a lot of ways to do it. But I'm thinking just to think a little more creatively about more of the carrots and fewer sticks.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Mayor. Councilmember Beach or Stevenson, thoughts for the staff?
You go first. I feel like I'm.
Yeah, I definitely think we need an incentive program. I'm also curious about the provision about the city taking the first assessment from an arborist or even hiring an independent arborist, and whether or not that actually helps with the liability question in terms of doing, you know, the reasonable action on behalf of the city. Because if we do that and we say, no, that's not a tree you can remove, and then that tree subsequently falls, that's a direct action that we've done something proactively, as opposed to just taking the word of the homeowner and an independent who might be driving towards that tree removal in the first place. Just a question.
Yeah, I'd probably leave that to our legal team in terms of liability, but with regard, I can share a little bit about what Menlo Park does. And not that they're the best, but they just had the best conversation with me. They do retain an independent arborist the city has hired. So in situations, and this typically comes up mostly with planning, where there is a disagreement between the city arborist and whatever their supplied arborist report, the city pays for the independent arborist to go and do an assessment. Now, thus far, I typically do not inspect private trees. I am assessing the site. I'm visibly seeing what's going on, and do I agree with the assessment that has come to me? That is because of liability reasons that it presents to the city if I'm evaluating private trees. I am determining if the report that is in front of me is in fact accurate, and does this comply with what our current ordinance is? Does it meet the threshold for removal? But I don't know if our city attorneys want to say anything. Nope, not yet.
Would you like to go?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Boy, it's late, so I'll try to be pretty quick. Hopefully I'll be reasonably coherent, but a lot of great stuff. I love the idea that you're going to protect trees that were required as a condition of removal. It's remarkable that we haven't had that protection before, but there's a lot of good stuff in this ordinance. When we talk about incentives, I love the idea of incentives. We'll have to really flush this out. Anybody who's a property owner in Burlingame, even if you're cash poor, you have such a valuable asset. So when I think of like means-based or need-based, I'm more concerned about somebody who wants to do an appeal, but maybe doesn't, may or may not have the cash to do an appeal. If we could have a means-based, somebody who wants to initiate that. I'm concerned about how do we subsidize homeowners to do tree maintenance. I think we really have to flush that out, just because people have such wealth if they do own a home, and in their even if they're cash poor, to say. So I want to think that through, but I understand the point that we're bringing up here tonight. I am concerned, as the mayor mentioned, of if your tree dies, that the city fining people on top of that doesn't sit well with me. I don't think that makes, I think we have a lot of really angry people. I absolutely think if a tree is dead, dying, or extreme failure risk, we've got to be able to take it out without a big appeal process. We've had a lot of serious things happen in the last few years with trees that are very dangerous, and even trees we didn't think so. So I think we have to allow the professionals to make those decisions. I would want more definition on the term undesirable species, because I need to understand that further before I could go along with that. Also, structural damage. How do we define that? You mentioned something tonight, maybe not sidewalks and driveways?
Correct, not hardscape, actual.
Or dwelling. What about a garage? What about a building? I think we need to flush that out. I'm not sure I'm sold on what that means, but I'd want to understand what's structural damage. I think some of the public comments tonight about addressing having different criteria for wildland urban interface is really important. Particularly surrounding like Hills Canyon and up by Skyline. I think it's not all created equal up there. We have to do fire mitigation. So I don't know how to handle that, but we got to be thinking about that differently. I also love the idea of having, at least at first blush, having, if somebody comes in, having the city hire the independent arborist that Mr. Ben brought up, that the resident is paying for it, but the economic interest isn't a direct line to the person who's hiring the the specialist. So I kind of like that idea, just like we do for a CEQA thing, right? You know, we hire out. So I like that idea. I am curious to learn more about what the Vice Mayor was saying. We have a lot of limits on what we can say for private housing. So whether that's single family homes or ADUs, what limits do we have, if any, on commercial? I think the community is concerned about overdeveloping and disregarding trees. So as long as we're really putting in some rails there. I don't have a problem with, based on the criteria you've laid out, having the appeal from beautification go to the city manager. I do think it makes sense to have appeal from the planning commission go to city council, because you're looking at an entire project. I think that's what's proposed. I have fully support the idea of, even though we're all impatient, we want big trees. I think smaller containers are proven, like the Vice Mayor said, seedlings. We've got to be patient and let trees grow. So I think I have no interest in forcing that and saying we have to have big trees in order to get big sooner. I'd rather have trees be successful long-term. The other thing I just want to bring up is, how do we educate the community on the rules? I mean, people come from all different places, all different philosophies. And if they literally don't know, like literally my families in New England, the mentality is just, there's a tree in the way. So, you know, there's so many trees, like they may not understand the rules. So do we have really clear disclosures, like with a big, when people are buying property, a colored thing that they have to sign, that you have to understand what the rules are in Burlingame about trees? And here's a flyer and here's a brochure. And so that at least, and then we do a mailer when we do these out, like we have to educate the community before it becomes a, oops, I didn't know. Because it's just a mess if people do something and they honestly didn't know the rules.
And that was echoed at the Beautification Commission, that, you know, we really should be working with the Realtor Association.
Yeah.
Getting that information out, that Burlingame prioritizes trees.
Yeah.
Don't think you can just buy your house and tear down the tree.
Yeah.
Not how it works here.
And there's got to be a verbal, but there's got to be something in writing, a colorful brochure that flags something different. Hopefully we're doing that. And then I do like the idea of truly bad actors that are truly reckless, that are truly, basically we're told, no, they can't do something, and then they go and do it. We've got to have stronger civil, or I guess, you know, love up to the city attorney's office, what's appropriate, civil or criminal if it's necessary, if it were really egregious. But yeah, those are some of my comments. Sorry, went on too long, but
No.
Great conversation.
Oh, thanks for the input.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Mayor.
I just want to make it clear that I am not suggesting that city funds be used to subsidize private tree maintenance. But what I am saying is, the reality is there are lots of seniors who are very low income, who are on Social Security, fixed incomes. They bought their houses 40, 50, 60 years ago, and they simply do not have the money to maintain these very large trees. So figuring out a way to get them help is what I'm talking about, but not from city funds.
Thank you for that clarification. I'll likewise try to be relatively brief given the hour. But I do start with a question. So when we look at the trees that have come out, and maybe it's just an intuitive answer for you, what's the ratio between homeowners who are taking out a tree, they've lived there, they're taking out a tree for whatever reason, versus developers who have, you know, bought a parcel and now want they want to build more easily or build more, like which?
Not any number you could hold me to, 2-1. 2 being homeowner, 1 being development.
Okay, that's interesting. So, so I would have thought
Perception is opposite.
Yeah, the perception that it's.
Let me give a little caveat here. Okay, Top Golf is being developed on city property. They are removing 80 trees, but they are very small trees. They are not of protected size. That is a large development. I'm not including something like that.
No.
You know.
Yeah, no, I think we're talking about
Home, single family home. Yeah, 2-1.
2-to-1 homeowner. Okay. Well, I thought it would be higher for new developers or people basically completely rebuilding. I would say having first of all, I completely endorse Commissioner Pfaff's point. It was super helpful to have Ralph Osterling on planning because he brought now, or maybe it was Leslie, but brought knowledge to that deliberation that, many of us, most of us didn't have. That was super helpful. I don't think you can compel it. I just noticed that it was true. I will say though, that we have a number of different aesthetic guidelines for building that get in the way of preserving trees. So for example, we don't just allow garages in the back. We create a really big incentive to put the garage in the back. And that's because back in the day, that felt like the look and feel we wanted for our single family homes. So if we want to create more space for the urban forest, which I think we should, then we should examine those incentives that say build 2 structures. Because I won't go into all the reasons why the people thought that was a good idea, but they did. So developers do, as Charlie Munger famously said, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. Right. So we incent more building on a parcel than we need to. I would look at that. It's a funny thing. This is a little superficial, but we keep calling it the tree ordinance. It's really the private tree ordinance. Yeah. In a sense. Now it does affect what a homeowner can do to a public tree, like don't touch. But really we're talking about private trees with this ordinance, right? And I sometimes wonder if people really understand that.
So in our thought process here is actually combining 2 parts of the code, because presently they're separated: street trees and you have a whole set, and private trees. So we're looking at putting them together as protected trees. But as I think it was Mr. Ben had mentioned about, certain things applying to the city or not. When we remove a city tree, we're not going through the public notification process, right? Yeah, most of these things really do affect what's going on on private property.
Right. So I just think from a title point of view, it might help.
Yeah.
I know it's superficial, but it's really a private tree ordinance. And then finally, with respect, I completely agree with the number of people who said we need independent arborists. I'm one of the cynics who believes you can pay for any opinion you want. So I would use as a model in planning, again, when a home has been designed by an architect and nobody is comfortable with it, but the planning commission doesn't want to become 7 architects trying to figure it out, we send it to design review, which are experts that are third party that the applicant pays for and who we trust. And I think that's something that we absolutely should do with arborist reports.
And if you don't mind me asking a question, do you believe that should be the cost of the applicant?
Yes.
Okay.
100%. Sorry, Lynn. No, Linda, you can't.
Really should get more professional, because a private tree that's large is part of a big canopy.
Okay.
That's important. We really should be professional.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I got process going on here. I can't. So that's it for me anyway. Anybody else have any final thoughts for staff? Yes, Commissioner.
Also, now I'm a commissioner. That's good. Rachel. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you hit on the key head, and I think the statistics would show that the city, when it's talking about a city tree, it's following the process and the guidelines that we're trying to do. We're trying to replace it. We're doing things that make sense. I think the issue is a private tree owner situation, and we really have to think about how we administer and monitor that and guide that appeal process appropriately, because I think I know neighbors that have removed trees without talking to the city, and they're definitely a big tree category. So I think that's where the issue is, and we really should orient our thinking predominantly around that and how we actually effectively educate, effectively monitor, effectively incent, and effectively punish when there's violations.
Thank you.
Right. And maybe there's even a way to reward somebody who's taking care of a big tree, maybe it's, I don't know, discount on the water. Anyway, any other comments? thank you very much for all the work and appreciate being at the front end of this conversation.
That was a great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, it really was a good presentation. Right, that is it for the agenda. That takes us to acknowledgements. Oh, sorry, council committee reports and announcements. Are there any reports? Councilmember Beach.
Just a brief one. Transportation Authority, another 2.3 million to the Broadway Grades Up project for sort of another phase of it. And importantly, some very important wording in the resolution and discussion that sort of acknowledged we are very much eligible for 50% of the cost to come from the Transportation Authority. So it's not codified, but there is very important acknowledgement. So that's
Great news.
yeah, keeping it moving.
Any other reports of activities? Okay, seeing none. Future agenda items, are there any agenda items people would like to suggest? See none? Okay. And then so acknowledgements, we have, agendas and packets, so forth, that are attached that we can read of the various commissions and all the hard work they're doing. That brings us to the end of our meeting. I do have somebody I would like to close in, but I also want to invite other council members. Okay. So I'd like to close in honor of somebody who did a lot for our city and a part of the city that is one of our most beloved parts, and that's our library. And so it was brought to my attention by our librarian, Mr. McCauley, that Sally Krakow died just a couple days ago. She was a wonderful, funny, bold, energetic volunteer. She loved books and the written word. She started her life down south in Southern California, and then met her husband, Roger Krakow of Iowa, and they moved to San Francisco and then down to San Mateo. They raised 4 sons, and she loved entertaining. And if all you heard was that, you might think, well, this is a person who's spent just a lot of time here in California. But in fact, they love to travel. So they went on Moroccan Saharas, and they slept in a rice barge on the River Kwai, and they hiked through Bhutan, and celebrated their anniversary on the Amazon, and hiked to the top of Machu Picchu, among many, many other things. So really a wonderful couple. And for the last decade, the reason the librarian wanted to bring this to our attention, for the last decade, Sally has been devoted, well, Sally and Roger both devoted to the Burlingame Library Foundation. So she passed away a couple of days ago. The services will be December 9th at St. Matthew's Episcopal in San Mateo. And so if you join me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Mayor.